Hi everyone, this is Steve, jumping in before our episode on Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window with a special announcement. We've decided to finish our month of Hitchcock with a full commentary track on one of his greatest films, but we are leaving the choice of that film up to you. It's also 2019, which means a whole new year of great films are available for us to talk about. So we'd love to hear what 2009 movie you are most interested in hearing John and I discuss. So in order to answer those questions and a few others, we've created our 2019 listener survey. We're going to post a link to that survey on our Facebook page, on our website, Cine-Files.net, as well as Twitter and Instagram. But if you like comping down complicated URLs from a podcast, get your pencil ready. The 2019 Cine-Files listener survey is available at www.surveymonkey.com/r/C8NTMQL. That's surveymonkey.com/r/C8NTMQL. And now I give you Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window.
I've seen bickering and family quarrels and mysterious trips at night, and knives and saws and ropes, and now since last evening, not a sign of the wife. All right, now you tell me where she is.
I don't know.
What's she doing? Where is she?
Maybe he's leaving his wife. I don't know. I don't care. Lots of people have knives and saws and ropes around their houses, and lots of men don't speak to their wives all day. Lots of wives nag and men hate them and trouble starts, but very, very few of them end up in murder, if that's what you're thinking.
It's pretty hard for you to keep away from that word, isn't it?
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a voiceover artist, writer, producer, and host over at Collider, and lover of all things interesting. And so I'm very happy.
All things interesting.
All things interesting. But it's all subjective what I find interesting.
I was just going to say, I guess we all are. Yeah. Whatever we find interesting, we probably love.
We do love it. And this is, I can't believe we're finally doing it, Steve. A Hitchcock movie on the Cine-Files after 3 years.
Not just a Hitchcock movie, my friend.
Right.
We are in the midst of the month of Hitchcock.
Yeah, man.
And for those of you who've already listened to our kind of deep dive into Hitchcock and his life, that was last week. And now today we are beginning our exploration of Rear Window.
Yeah.
This is just a great film. And of course, one of the reasons we're doing it is it's a suggestion of not one, not two, not three, but four of our Patreons.
Nice.
James Williams, Clay, who's been helping us out. Yeah. Patrick Giormo.
Sure.
I think I'm saying that right. Rodrigo Picardo.
Nice.
All four of them wanted to hear us talk about Rear Window. And right now we want to hear them talk about Rear Window. All right, thanks so much, guys.
Wow.
Really appreciate your support, and we really appreciate that you picked this great film for us to do.
And such four different perspectives on the film, too. It's very interesting. I love that. I love how one film can affect people in so many different ways and so many different things they say there.
Let's hope so. And by the way, sometimes we don't get all of them back, so it could be three different perspectives or two different perspectives. So, John, how did you first come to Rear Window?
Just recently, literally last year or earlier this year, if I remember correctly, because I know I Instagrammed about it. So I think it was last year that I saw it for the first time. It's one of those ones that had been like, everyone has blind spots of the great filmmakers. And you go, I'll get around to it. And then one day I kind of... Well, not one day, I guess. Steve, you know this. Every once in a while, I'll go on these, what have I not seen from the top 100 at AFI?
Yeah.
And I'll look on TCM, and I'll set my DVR to record those films so I can watch them. And Rear Window was on there just blinking at me going, when are you going to watch me? When are you going to watch me? So I finally sat down and watched an afternoon when I was sick from work on a Saturday afternoon and just sat and watched it and really enjoyed the film. And in 2018... it still has so much to say about this idea of spying on your neighbors, this idea of minding your business, and also this idea of what it can all lead to and whether you should do the right thing or not do the right thing. And it's incredible how...
And whether or not it's the right thing.
And whether or not... Exactly. And it's incredible how Hitchcock fills every one of these apartments with such life with these interesting characters. Speaking of loving all things interesting, all these interesting characters that could work today, even today.
For me, I had literally have no idea when I first saw it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I know that by the time I was in college, I had seen it, but I really don't know when. I'm sure it was on TV at some point when I was in junior high-ish, something like that. But I don't think I appreciated it until film school, and then this became a real. There's certain films that you went back to and back to and back to in film school. Of course, Citizen Kane is one of them, and Rear Window is definitely one of them that we return to over and over again because the craftsmanship is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I will say, watching it this time, I feel so privileged that we are doing this month on Hitchcock because I didn't appreciate it. I mean, this movie is so damn good.
Yeah.
And really getting the opportunity to study it this time, wow. It really, really just blew me away. Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about pre-production. It's one of the things this movie is based on is a famous case in England, I believe, which is the Dr. Crippet case, in which a doctor fell in love with his secretary, murdered his wife, cut her up in little pieces, buried her, and then took his secretary off on a cruise or sailing and disguised her as a sailor on the ship. And they eventually got caught, and the wife was discovered. And so and there's another very famous murder that this is sort of based on. It's also based on a short story, which is by Cornwell Woolrich, and John Michael Hayes wrote the screenplay. And what we should say is that Hitchcock is involved at every single step, including the screenplay. He didn't write the screenplays, but he definitely, piece by piece, detail by detail, he was involved in every single step on the screenplay. And one of the things is that in the short story, there's no love interest. So the short story is just about a dude who's got a broken leg observing this murder. But the whole depth of this movie really comes from the addition of the love interest of the Grace Kelly character, and that wasn't in there. And, he cast one of his favorite actors to work with, which is Jimmy Stewart, who seems to be sort of, when he wants the everyman, he goes with Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, and this is about that time where Jimmy is transitioning, right?
Yeah.
From like the kind of leading man of the 40s and 50s into something a little more
mature.
Mature, complex, dark, those kinds of things. And so, yes, an everyman, but also showing what can be lurking inside the everyman that no one sees on the surface.
This is his second film with Grace Kelly. First was Dial M for Murder, and it sounds like Hitchcock and his wife Alma, they love Grace Kelly. She became a very close friend. She visited them a lot. And we had to say, there have been lots of leading ladies that Hitchcock used and was to some degree obsessed with. It seems like Grace Kelly's the number one. She's the ideal. She is the perfect Hitchcock blonde. And later on in his career with people like Tippi Hedren and Kim Novak, he was trying to recreate Grace Kelly.
He was trying to vertigo them.
He literally was trying to vertigo them. It was shot on the Paramount lot. This is the biggest set ever built at that time on the Paramount lot. It's one of the biggest sets Hitchcock ever did in his career. And one of the things they did is they get in there and they built this whole neighborhood in this one studio, but it wasn't tall enough. They didn't have enough room. Underneath the studio, underneath the concrete floor, was a basement where they mostly stored furniture. And so they said, let's bust into the basement. So they knocked out the whole concrete floor, went down a whole nother story, and that bottom became the where the grass is and where the bottom of this neighborhood is. And the ground floor, that's where Jimmy Stewart's apartment is. Now one story up.
Okay.
I mean, this is a huge, huge, massive set.
Yeah.
That's all the pre-production I got.
Okay.
Want to go into the movie?
Hell yeah.
We start, strangely enough, looking through some windows.
Yeah.
And as we're looking at these windows, the curtains slowly rise up on that title Rear Window. You couldn't be more perfect as an opening for this film.
Yeah.
We are literally opening our eyes onto the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And those windows are our eyes.
And getting a good idea of what this neighborhood is and the characters involved in them and their daily lives.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because the next thing that happens is the credits end as the camera pushes out through that window, and then we begin this counterclockwise pan starting on a cat, and we go and see everything that's in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We go up to see a family with a little girl, which is who we see the least of in this whole film. We see a couple sleeping on a fire escape, and then we catch our first glimpse of Miss Torso.
Yeah.
I can't think of a more objectifying name. She's literally called in the film Miss Torso.
All right.
And this is this beautiful blonde woman who is dressing as we speak. It's fairly risque of a shot of her back as she takes off and then puts on a bra, and then she goes and begins dancing and brushing her hair. And the camera keeps panning over until it pans over to Jimmy Stewart sweating.
Yeah.
And then a shot of a very high thermometer. It's over 100 degrees. And we've kind of moved into our movie.
Yeah.
By the way, it actually was really hot on this set because they had to light all of these spaces all at the same time. So it was consistently over 100 degrees on a set. So when they're acting hot, it's hot. And we continue to see more of our neighborhood. We see that there's a composer working up on a piano. We see our married couple who are sleeping on this balcony wake up. We get a little visual gag because they're actually head to toe. We see the man sleeping one way, and then the woman pulls off the covers and you see, oh, she's down at his feet, which is kind of funny. We're back with Miss Torso, who's now doing some dance moves. And by the way, Hitchcock, she wanted to go to there was on the studio lot, there's the studio choreographer. So she said, well, let me go to the choreographer to get some dance moves. And he said, absolutely not. You will come up with your own dance moves. And so those are what she made up, which again is great direction because you want it to be what you don't want choreography.
Right.
This is what someone would do when they're on their own.
Yep.
We hear by the way, one of the nominations this got is for sound design, and the sound design is great. And Hitchcock pushed it in all of these levels to get real sound with real reverberation, but real distances. And right now we're hearing children playing, we're hearing street sounds. It feels really, really real.
It effectively walks you into the world. Like you're surrounded by the world as you're watching this movie that he has created.
Well, and one of the really important things that Hitchcock insisted on is the geography.
Right.
Is you have to he wanted you to understand exactly where everything is.
Yeah.
What the distances are, which windows are next to which windows, which a lot of filmmakers today, they don't really care about.
No, they'll fix it in post or they'll edit around it or they'll make it look the way it's supposed to look. But like, those are the three things that I really, first is the colors, the distance of where everything is and the geography of the placement, and then the sounds, very natural sounds that you would hear. If you've ever lived in an apartment complex or ever lived around an apartment complex, those are the sounds you would naturally, the combination of all those different sounds crashing into each other at the same time.
And it's funny, like there is a composer whose name I think is Waxman, but really all he composed is this one theme, which is what the composer in the movie is working on.
Right.
Other than that, this movie's no score. To use one of the great film school terms, the score is entirely diegetic.
Okay.
The terms are diegetic and non-diegetic, which means it's either in the world of the movie or it's not. So non-diegetic means we're out of the world of the movie, so score is coming in. Diegetic means we're in the world of the movie, so you're hearing things come over a radio or the composer playing piano. Yeah. And this is entirely a diegetic film. Okay. Now you guys have all been to a little bit of film school. And now we're back to Jimmy Stewart. And as we pan down him, we see that he is wearing a big honkin' cast.
Yeah.
And we see his name is L.B. Jeffries on the cast. And this is perfect Hitchcock storytelling. We see the cast. Camera continues to pan. We see a broken camera. So we know, something happened. It continues to pan. We see an amazing photograph of a car wreck. It continues to pan. We see a fire. We see more photographs. So we realize that this is a photographer. We see more photographic equipment. We see a beautiful woman in negative. And then we see a beautiful woman on the cover of a magazine.
Yeah.
And we pretty much know who this guy is.
Yeah, I call this Sherlocking, where you have non-dialogue exposition that gives you a window into this character before the character even speaks.
I love that term.
Yeah.
Can we adopt that officially in the Cine-Files?
Hashtag Sherlocking.
Yeah, that is really good because the great thing about it is that you are active as an audience member.
Yeah.
It's not, this again, one of the classic terms in writing and screenwriting is show, don't tell.
Right.
And this is show, is that you're figuring out, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have some dialogue that says, I am a photographer who is injured in a blah, blah, blah.
Right. Voiceover dialogue or whatever. Yeah. But also it makes the audience feel like it puts the audience in the framework of, oh, this is a mystery. I want to figure this guy out. Like you actively engage the audience, like you said, Steve, but you actively also put them in the position of where they have to feel like they're trying to figure things out as it goes along, which I think is brilliant.
Well, and we're being a voyeur.
Yes.
There's this dude asleep.
Great point.
And we are spying on him while he's sleeping.
Yep.
Which, of course, is what the whole movie is going to be about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and this is one of the things that's so incredible about this movie is the unity of theme
that goes on every single layer, particularly when we get into the relationship between Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart and all of the relationships and visions of love and romance that we see throughout the rest of the film. It's all hooked up together. It's a little bit later. He's shaving, gets a phone call. It's his boss who wants to celebrate because he thought this was the week the guy's going to get his cast off.
Right.
It's not the week he's going to get his cast off. That's a week from now.
If only it was.
Yeah. Well, this guy probably would have gotten away with murder if it had been.
Hello.
Yeah. And he probably wouldn't have 2 broken legs. Exactly. Spoiler alert for the end of the movie. And of course, Jimmy Stewart was like, no, I want to go out. And we kind of find out that he is a out in the world action kind of photographer. And there's something going on in Kashmir, like a revolution or politics or something. Right. And he wants to be there and he cannot be there.
And once again, that's a nice window into his character, which is why he actively gets involved in this situation. He likes to be in the thick of the drama. It is his drive.
And of course, again, what Hitchcock does about the scene is while you're hearing this conversation, most movies would stop there. This is a scene about conversation. But instead, we're watching Miss Torso.
Yes.
You know, we're seeing what he's seen, and the things that he has seen are directly related to what he's talking about.
If you don't pull me out of this swamp of boredom, I'm going to do something drastic.
Like what?
Like what? I'm going to get married, and then I'll never be able to go anywhere.
And as he does that, he is looking from Miss Torso, because that's making him think about getting married, to looking about the Torvalds, which is Raymond Burr, great actor who I watched as a kid all the time on Perry Mason.
Oh, yeah.
And later on Ironsides. I mean, it was all reruns for me when I was watching it, but I'm not that old. Ironside, I think, was on when I was alive.
Yeah, maybe.
But Perry Mason is...
No, it's a black and white.
But I did love Perry Mason.
But I loved him in Godzilla, so I mean, I have Raymond Burr all over the place. Yeah.
What a weird career.
I know, right? You do what you got to do, man.
And right now, we see him arguing with his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a big guy. Like he's like this a version of Lee J. Cobb, another Lee J. Cobb body type. Do you know what I'm saying? Larger dude, bulky at the top, scary as hell, strong, pronounced face. Yeah. It's an interesting, and he's blonde, right, or white haired,
white hair, yeah,
which makes even more stand out even more.
Very weird and striking.
Yeah.
Well, and again, you what you see that Jimmy Stewart is seeing is reflecting what he is talking about, because as he's watching Thorvald and his wife argue, he's saying,
Can't you just see me rushing home to a hot apartment to listen to the automatic laundry and the electric dishwasher and the garbage disposal, the nagging wife.
I don't know any other movie that does this in this way, which is the in a weird way, all of these neighbors are seen into Jimmy Stewart's brain.
Yeah.
Like these are his thoughts.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strange combination. And he gets off the phone, and the next thing that happens is he gets an itch. Jimmy Stewart's itch acting is fantastic, because that cast goes all the way up to his waist, and he has to get his little back scratcher thing down into the cast to get that itch. And man, when he gets that itch, I'm relieved. Have you ever had a cast, by the way?
No.
Yeah, I did I broke my arm when I was 9.
Yep.
And had the full, cast halfway up. Just for the record, John Roca just knocked wood.
I've never broken anything, but I've twisted my ankle, or I've worn an air cast, but not
not the full
cast,
real.
no.
Yeah, I had a real one on my arm.
Wow.
When you get that itch, it's rough.
Oh, I'm sure it's the worst.
Yeah, I've broken several things. Yeah, toe, my arm, dislocated a shoulder.
Yeah,
cracked some ribs.
Well, maybe I'm the Bruce Willis to your Mr. Glass.
I think apparently.
But yeah. I one of my greatest fears is breaking anything.
It's not that bad.
Okay.
I mean, I don't recommend it.
It looks bad.
Honestly, the broken arm hurt a lot less than like a really bad sprained ankle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And back pain. Don't get back pain. Back stuff is the worst.
Yeah. But we digress.
I think we did. Listen, if this was top 10, this would have been like 25 minutes.
Oh, yeah, of course. It's been a 25-minute discussion about breaking things. Matt would have had some interesting way that he broke something in his life. Yeah.
Back outside, we see Raymond Burr exiting. We see one of the women we haven't met, and she's kind of sunbathes, and she's a sculptor, and she's fairly friendly. Raymond Burr Torvald is working in the garden, and our sculptor lady kind of gives him a bit of criticism about what he's doing with the plants, and he is not nice to her.
Oh, why don't you shut up?
Yeah, that's That's rough to your neighbor.
He's a brusque guy.
But here's the thing, though, is that he's an unhappy dude.
Yeah.
Like his wife, I don't think she's a picnic.
No.
I mean,
but then again,
I don't think she deserves to get killed.
I don't think she wants to get
pieces.
would you want to be a picnic around a guy like that, though? That's
Well, this is, but we don't get to know. I mean,
we don't. We really
don't. The thing about we don't know. We know that she's an invalid, and we know that she's taking care of her. Because later on, we get to the scene where he brings her a meal in bed with a flower, and she just tosses that flower away, and like we don't know the chicken and the egg,
right?
Like we don't know if he has been an asshole, which caused her to be abusive, or she has been horrible to him, which causes her to be him to be an asshole and have this affair, which leads to like we don't know where it starts. Obviously, killing your wife, is bad.
Yes,
that is right here. You got it from the Cine-Files right now.
That's the
folks.
official position of the
Our
Cine-Files.
official position is killing your wife is bad.
Yes, killing anybody.
Yeah. Stella.
Oh yeah.
Thelma Ritter enters. She is like the insurance nurse that has been paid for by his insurance, who apparently, kind of waits on him hand and foot, gives him massages. She is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
She is so good in this movie.
Great comedic relief.
Yeah. And what she does immediately is because she sees him watching The Neighbors and calls him a peeping Tom. Yeah. And that people like this go to jail. This is actually a crime.
The New York State sentence for a peeping Tom is 6 months in the workhouse.
Oh, hello, Stella.
They got no windows in the workhouse. You know, in the old days, they used to put your eyes out with a red-hot poker. Any of those bikini bombshells you're always watching worth a red-hot poker?
And then she has this line, which I like quite a bit, which is, we become a race of peeping Toms. Maybe you should get outside your house and take a look in. She calls that homespun philosophy. He says he read that in Reader's Digest. And while she's taking his temperature, she goes on and says that she should have been a gypsy fortune teller. And she tells this story about how she had been the nurse in 1929 to the CEO of General Motors who had kidney problems. And she's like, I don't think this guy has kidney problems. I think this guy is stressed out.
Then I ask myself, what's General Motors got to be nervous about? Overproduction, I says. Collapse. When General Motors has to go to the bathroom 10 times a day, the whole country's ready to let go.
Which I think is a funny line. And of course, Jeff, being the more realistic person, says,
Well, Stella, in economics, a kidney ailment has no relationship with the stock market, none whatsoever.
Crashed, didn't it?
and what's funny is this exactly parallels who Jeff is going to be in the movie, which is he's going to make observations and he's going to make conclusions about what those observations means.
Right.
And then all these people are going to say, particularly the detective, that has nothing to do with reality,
Right.
but it crashed, didn't it?
Yeah.
There was a murder, wasn't it?
True.
Yeah.
And also, I think we should take a moment here, Steve, to look at the time this is happening because of what she says, right? 1954.
Right.
This is what? On the heels of the Red Scare.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. So this idea of wanting to know what everyone is doing is now starting to become a mainstream subject of conversation, a topic, right? And this idea of it all. And yes, maybe I'm sure there were people in Tom's people get involved in people's lives in the 40s, 30s, 20s, whatever. It's always been but this is now becoming a part of the movies, this idea of seeing something, watching something, looking at something, being interested in people's lives and having opinions about it. It's all started gossiping, right? This is all started kind of coming out of from the 40s with Hedda Hopper and all them go doing all the kinds of things they're doing. Now we're into the 50s and now it's becoming where everybody's got some kind of interest in somebody, creating some kind of scenario. And I love that you want to get involved in it. So this, what she says, right? Take a step outside ourselves and look inside. That's almost the tenet of psychology. This idea of don't be looking at other people for their problems. Take a look at yourself first to analyze yourself and see how you're interpreting the situation first. That's where you start the process of understanding who you are or what's going on. I love that.
That's a great point. And particularly, in thinking about the Red Scare, I hadn't thought about it, but it's such a good point because what happens at that time is that a thing that someone did is suddenly going to be used against them, some personal story.
Right.
And it's like, yes, it could be that someone was actually a communist agent working for the Soviets to destroy the country. That's possible. It also could be that someone went on a date and that date ended up in a meeting and they were in a ruin. Now suddenly they're being asked to name names. Their life is being ruined. And that do we have the right to have our private opinions to ourselves and discuss things in ourselves and have conflicts with our spouses without the world watching and judging it?
Right.
Yeah.
Without having all the context of it.
And brother, look where we are today.
Yeah.
I mean, the ability of the world to be up in our business, there it's like if you close the window, nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
We can't close the window now. The window is sitting in my iPad right here and my phone and my records and everything I buy and on Facebook and on Twitter. Like and is the world being very, hey, live and let live. Let's not judge other people's business. No, it's not what's happening.
Yeah, on the heels of everything that happened with Facebook and everything like that, and with the Cambridge Analytica, all that happening, you're just like, oh, everyone seems to have access to all our personal data, and where's our privacy? It's all gone. We're living in a rear window world now.
Absolutely, man, scary.
Yes,
and of course, what Stella is saying is you're going to end up in front of a judge and get 3 years, for this. And really, she's correct.
Yeah, the whole time.
And he is already being a full peeping Tom, and pretty soon he's going to pull out the binoculars.
Right.
That's not messing around. It's funny. She finishes taking his temperature, and she says he's got a hormone deficiency. He's like, "What? How you could judge that from taking your temperature?" And she says,
Those bathing beauties you've been watching haven't raised your temperature 1 degree in a month.
Because what's he doing? He's staring at Miss Torso.
exactly.
Yeah. We move over to the massage table, and she's not nice to him at this massage.
No.
She's pretty brutal to him. And now we bring up the subject of Lisa, which is Grace Kelly's character.
Yeah.
And why does he not want to marry her?
I'm not ready for marriage.
Every man's ready for marriage when the right girl comes along. And Lisa Fremont is the right girl for any man with half a brain who can get one eye open.
Great lines, man.
His response is, she's all right. Now, look, I don't think that Lisa Fremont is right for every man. There are people that wouldn't be right for. But anyone who describes Grace Kelly as all right,
Yeah.
that is not correct.
Yeah.
She is not just all right.
Especially a guy creeping into middle age. For God's sakes.
And she's kind of going, what's going on here? Do you have a fight? Is the father loading up the shotgun? Is that what's going on here?
No, she's just not the girl for me.
Yeah, she's only perfect.
She's too perfect. She's too talented. She's too beautiful. She's too sophisticated. She's too everything but what I want.
Too perfect is going to be a thing that's going to come up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because he just says she comes from the sophisticated Park Avenue world, and that's not his world. He's a camera bum. That's how he describes himself.
Can you imagine her tramping around the world with a camera bum who never has more than a week's salary in the bank if she was only ordinary?
I actually don't think he wants ordinary.
No.
That's not what he wants.
No.
And then he has this line that comes back as really important.
You never gonna get married?
Well, I'll probably get married. When I do, it's going to be to someone who thinks of life not just as a new dress and a lobster dinner and the latest scandal. I need a woman who's willing to, who's willing to go anywhere and do anything and love it. So the honest thing for me to do is just call the whole thing off. Let her find somebody else.
It's funny watching this movie this time, is that I have real problems with this guy.
Yeah.
He's a problematic person.
Oh, no, this is an interesting thing to watch. Like, he's the protagonist of this film, 1954. Yes. And that's why you cast Jimmy Stewart, because you don't want to hate the guy. And it causes you to explore your feelings for him. But in 2018, with the advent of how we've changed as a culture so much, just over the last 5 years, Steve, you look at this movie now, and this is not a good guy. This is not this is a kind of a complex character that you can decide for yourself if you want to enjoy this guy or enjoy his feel that he deserves what he gets at the end. These are the things that you have to kind of explore within yourself. But yeah, I remember watching it last year. I was like, yeah, I don't like this guy. He's kind of a judgmental prick. He's really just one shade away from Raymond Burr on a flip side of the coin. You don't see him killing somebody, but you could see him yelling at what's her face, the sculptor, for telling him how to do the plants.
Well, and see, we've said this a lot, that looking at this movie with 2018 lives, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think Hitchcock wants us to like this guy that much. I really think this is fully 1954 because you see all of the little cracks in his behavior. And you see what we'll see throughout this movie is imagery reflecting his kind of fucked up perspective on the world.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, very clearly in the filmmaking. I mean, yes, I think some of our feelings about these things have changed, but a lot of it is like, no, that's what Hitchcock was saying, which is interesting because one of the interesting things about this film is Hitchcock's a cerebral guy. He is not an active, passionate person. And the distance between the person who acts and the person who is thinking of things, observing, being a voyeur, being a spectator, a spy on life. That's a lot about Hitchcock too.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's interesting because the other movie we're doing in our month of Hitchcock is Vertigo. And I think Vertigo also is the other movie that gets really close to the bone of who Hitchcock is.
Yeah.
As opposed to a lot of his other movies, which are thrilling and exciting and beautifully crafted, but they don't have a lot of heart to them in a way, you know, because they are his craftsmanship as a director of suspense films.
Yeah.
And this and Vertigo, there's deeper stuff in there.
Vertigo is almost prescient for what he's going to do for all the leading ladies after Grace.
Oh, yeah.
In what happens to both those female characters in the movie.
Yeah. And then we hear, and this relates exactly to what Stella's about to say, which is like,
Look, Mr. Jeffries, I'm not an educated woman, but I can tell you one thing. When a man and a woman see each other and like each other, they ought to come together, wham, like a couple of taxis on Broadway, and not sit around analyzing each other like two specimens in a bottle.
Well, you know, it's the rare great director, Steve, that doesn't cast their leading man to reflect their own personal philosophies on life and explore other people's criticism of their philosophies without necessarily denigrating them. Like you open the film is essentially a discussion about these concepts and themes brought on by these characters in the exchanges they have. And most directors, the great ones, put their own philosophies through the protagonist's point of view to be questioned and either vilified or validated by the end of the movie.
well, this is why do you and I both love Citizen Kane?
Yeah.
You know, that's a movie where Welles puts himself at the center,
Yes.
and that character is a lot of Orson Welles, and he does not make himself look good.
No.
You know, the same is true. Martin Scorsese does that.
Yeah.
Coppola certainly does that. Woody Allen does that. Is that they're, you know, they're like, here's me. Now rip me to pieces on some level.
Right.
You know, and now we have Jimmy Stewart articulate there's an intelligent way to approach marriage and with feelings. And he has this very intellectual approach to it. And she just makes fun of him. She calls that baloney.
Once it was see somebody, get excited, get married. Now it's read a lot of books, fence with a lot of four-syllable words, psychoanalyze each other until you can't tell the difference between a petting party and a civil service exam.
And I love her when she talks about her own marriage. She says,
when I married Miles, we were both a couple of maladjusted misfits. We are still maladjusted misfits, and we have loved every minute of it.
I think that's a great way to look at a marriage, you know? And his response is to get me a sandwich. And she gives it, I have 2 words of advice for you. Marry her.
Yeah.
And this is what the movie's really going to be about. But he ignores her, of course. And because what he's really interested in is what's going on outside of his window. Right. He sees Thorvald. He sees our sculptor. Of course, he watches Miss Torso. And it's what's so interesting about this movie is you can see his thought process happening by what he's seen.
Yeah.
It's manifesting itself outside because he's thinking about Miss Torso, which leads him to think about sex, basically.
Yeah, right.
And we move to this couple moving into this apartment, and the manager is welcoming them in.
Right.
And she is dressed in white, and you could see Jimmy Stewart watching and going, oh, what exactly is going on here? And the manager goes away, and they kiss. And now Jimmy Stewart's going, okay, I'm not sure if I get it. Right. And then the husband, we see him come up with an idea. We see him take the woman outside, and we see them come back inside with him carrying her. And we cut to Jimmy Stewart, and he goes, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Of course, he doesn't say, oh, I get it, but you see in the reaction shot what it is. And again, they kiss, and the moment becomes intimate, and the woman suddenly looks out the window, almost right at Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
And then Jimmy Stewart is embarrassed, looks away, but looks back. It's the look away and look back that's so important to this film. And what does this young newlywed groom do? He closes the window shade.
Damn right.
Of course, and it is really perfect storytelling. You know, like we understand without any dialogue
Again.
exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Yep. And we fade to black. Later, it's sunset. By the way, on this big, huge set, they had 4 lighting setups that were up all the time. So they had a morning set, an afternoon set, a twilight set, and a night set. Wow. And so all they had to do was flip the switches, and we changed the time of day.
Wow.
You know, which is expensive because you're rigging 4 times as many lights as you really need to. But the speed and the efficiency, this is how Hitchcock wanted it to work. In fact, this is like the perfect Hitchcock because he liked to shoot on the set where he had everything under his perfect control.
Right.
He wanted to shoot regular hours, banker's hours. He didn't want to be out on location in the middle of the night. He wanted to have the meals he wanted to eat, everything around him that he wanted to have. And it's not that he didn't go out on location. Of course he did, but this is how he liked it. And by the way, I totally get that.
Yeah.
We hear a woman singing scales, and Jeff is asleep, and there's a shadow that moves in almost creepily up on him. And we cut to this shot of Grace Kelly coming towards camera. Man, it's a gorgeous shot.
Yeah. Beautiful, man.
And she smiles, and then he wakes up, and he smiles, and there's a kiss, and it's done in this step-down slow motion process, which is basically them adding slow motion later. Mm-hmm. And it has this very beautiful romantic feel, and they have a little bit of dialogue.
How's your leg?
It hurts a little.
And your stomach?
Empty as a football.
And do you love life?
Not too active.
Anything else bothering you?
Mm-hmm. Who are you?
What a great intro to our characters. Yeah. And she goes around turning on the lights and says, reading from top to bottom,
Lisa. Carol. Fremont.
And she is wearing a fantastically beautiful dress, which, of course, is designed by the great Edith Head.
Oh, wow.
And I think we need to take a moment because Edith Head is the most famous costume designer in the history of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. She had 35 Academy Award nominations, which is not the most in the history of Hollywood. That's John Williams, who has 50.
Wow.
But 35 nominations, won 8 awards. The first one was with the Heiress in 1949. The last one was for The Sting in 1973. When she showed up to Hollywood, she had no costume experience, 0. Wow. She got a job in the costume department to draw sketches, but she didn't get the job with her own sketches. She stole some sketches from some fellow students in art classes and brought them to the interview.
Hollywood.
Yep, that's in 1924. She's designing her first costumes in 1925 for silent films. By the 30s, she's one of Hollywood's top designers, to the point where they used her name in advertisements, to say featuring Edith Head costumes.
Wow.
Which, can you imagine, how there's nothing like that? I mean,
no.
Nobody has that in film today.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was different about her was all the male designers, they didn't talk to their leading ladies. They just said, you're going to wear this. And Edith Head went and talked to them and consulted them and tried things on with them. And, you think of course you have to do that, to get their opinions, what works for them,
of course,
what colors works for them, what are they comfortable in, how do they see the characters. And she worked extensively for Hitchcock, so much so that when Hitchcock moved from Paramount to Universal, so did Edith Head.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the great costume designers of all time.
Isn't she the one they base Edna Mode on in The Incredibles?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things they based the
character
on.
Fair point, yeah.
In addition to just Brad Bird's unbelievable voice.
Yes.
And we see, she's in this beautiful dress, and that's where we kind of find out that she's somehow in the fashion world, that she wears these incredibly expensive, beautiful dresses, and then that helps sell dresses, and she's, part of advertising for them and modeling for them.
It's the first Instagram model.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, that dress cost $1,100 in 1954.
That's a pretty penny.
That is a lot of money. And the last thing she says about the dress is, even at half the price, it would be worth it for the occasion.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, what's the occasion? Wednesday. And she says,
it's opening night of the last depressing week of L.B. Jeffries in a cast.
So she's coming to celebrate that he has only 1 week left.
Yep.
Again, she's perfect. I mean, like what an amazing thing she's going to do for him tonight. Of course, the first thing she does is she notices he has this old cigarette case. And this is a little throwaway moment, but I think it's so important. She's like, this is all kind of cracked and dingy. And he goes, oh, well, I got that in Hong Kong. It's kind of cracked too. And she goes, no. We're going to replace this with a beautiful silver cigarette case. This moment that's exactly what she wants to do with his life.
Yep.
Is that he is cracked and dirty and wants to travel around the world.
Right.
And she wants him in a 3-piece suit in Manhattan taking fashion photography.
Yep. She's going to fix that.
Nothing throwaway in this movie.
Nope.
And then she says, what would you think of starting off this week with dinner at 21, which of course is one of the fanciest, most expensive restaurants in New York at the time. And his response is, do you have perhaps an ambulance? And she says, better than that, 21. And she opens the door, and there is a waiter with wine and food ready to serve, to bring them an amazing dinner.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
Yeah, right?
And there's a great smile from Jimmy Stewart at this moment. And he brings in the ice bucket. We're going to open the wine. And because her response is, I can't think of anything more tiresome than what you've been through in this cast.
Yeah.
And he says he wants to get it off and get moving. Get moving is what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. He wants to be off in Kashmir.
Right.
She doesn't quite get it. And then she says she's going to make it a week you'll never forget. When Grace Kelly says she's going to give you a week you'll never forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want that week to start as soon as possible.
Yep. Exactly right. Mm-hmm. But apparently Jimmy Stewart really doesn't.
No.
It's like, what's wrong with you, dude?
Yeah, exactly.
Waiter goes away, and she starts talking about her day, and he is such a jerk. Because as soon as she's talking about the meeting she had and, these modeling things, his cocktail party and all this stuff, and he kind of asks her questions, oh, what was so-and-so wearing?
Right.
And she starts to answer thinking he's actually interested.
Yeah.
And he is not.
No, not even a little bit.
No, just messes with her.
Well, there's judgment there, right? Because he thinks he's above it. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Y'all are walking around, like what he says before she even shows up, the idea of like, oh, to his boss, can you see me coming home talking about the laundry or whatever? And
yeah,
it's not his life. Yeah.
Well,
it's not what he wants it to be, at least.
Yeah. Well, and all this sophisticated fashion stuff, it just seems stupid to him. Yeah.
Talks down.
And she says she's even planted his name in articles and columns in New York. And it's like, well, why?
Yeah.
And her reason is so he can get a studio of his own in Manhattan.
Yeah.
How would I run it from, say, Pakistan?
She doesn't, I think she genuinely doesn't get it at first.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
At this, well, I mean.
I feel like she gets it. I feel like she's willfully trying to not.
Maybe.
It's opinion, right? Like it feels like to me that she gets it, but she's trying to like, no, like move past it because she thinks eventually she will convince him what she wants him to do.
I think it's either in both. It's sort of, why would anyone not want to live in Manhattan and have this world that's the most fabulous? That's everything she believes is based on this is what's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's not what he believes. And this is sort of the core conflict they're going to have.
Isn't it time you came home? You could pick your assignment.
Well, I wish there was one I wanted.
Make the one you want.
You mean leave the magazine?
Yes.
For what?
For yourself and me. I could get you a dozen assignments tomorrow. Fashions, portraits.
And when she says portraits, he just laughs.
Of course, it's beneath him.
Yeah, of course. And you know what? There is a big difference between filming the revolution in some country,
of course,
and sitting down to take portraits of some rich person's little kid. That ain't the same thing. No disrespect to those portrait photographers out there.
Of course,
you're doing fine work, my friend.
No, but it's all a matter of status and all a matter of perception of the status. Exactly. Yeah. Like he probably sees it akin to like drawing sketches on the pier at a beach. And people's faces.
Yeah, and as she kind of talks about seeing him in this beautiful dark suit, he says,
"Now, let's stop talking nonsense, shall we?"
And you see she's hurt.
Yeah.
Yep. He is so dismissive, and she says, I guess I'll go make dinner.
Well, because his dismissiveness of what she wants him to be or what she wants to have for their future is him dismissing her as there's his future. As a couple. He's dismissing them as a couple the more he rejects the life she wants him to live.
Well, and he doesn't say, listen, I really appreciate what you're trying to do for me.
Right.
And I totally understand that, but that's not what I like, Like we're not, he just dismisses her.
Yeah.
He's just rude to her.
Out of hand. Yeah.
And as soon as he dismisses her and she's feeling sad, what does he go to look at? But Miss Lonely Hearts. Yep. Again, it's the direct connection to exactly what's happening in the scene.
Good point, Steve. Yeah.
Into what he watches. And we watch, man, it's so rough to watch. Because you see this woman, she's in a green dress. She's setting up a beautiful dinner for two, pouring a glass of wine. She lights the candles. he watches. He's kind of getting interested. Oh, what's going to hain here?
Right.
And he's more interested in the woman across the way who's making a dinner for two than the woman who's making him a dinner for two.
Or who brought in a dinner for two?
To him.
Yeah.
And she opens the door and she smiles, obviously seeing someone in the hallway.
Yep.
And she welcomes someone in, and no one comes in with her.
Right.
And she takes an imaginary hat, and we go back to Jeff going like, what's happening here?
Yeah, man.
And then slowly he starts to figure it out as she leans forward for an imaginary kiss. And Jimmy Stewart is kind of going, oh. And she pours the wine, and she starts talking to someone who isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes a toast. And of course, there's no one there to toast her back. But who is toasting her back? Is Jeff.
Yeah.
Is that he is actually connecting with the sad, lonely person over there and not the sad, lonely person who is with him. Yeah. And it's funny. When you first watch this movie, I think you think of Grace Kelly as so sophisticated and beyond the people that we see in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
But really, she is Miss Torso and Miss Lonely Hearts.
Right.
That's who she is.
Yeah.
We're seeing, and Jeff is seeing the beautified, the show that she's putting on for him.
Right.
But when she goes back alone to her apartment, man.
Yeah.
You know?
I wonder what the window into that apartment is.
Yeah.
To watch her.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's Miss Torso and Miss Lonely Hearts.
Yeah.
And at the end, Miss Lonely Hearts, she can't keep up the act anymore, and she puts her glass down, she puts her head in her hand, and starts to cry.
Yeah. And how many people actually do that? That's what I was thinking was interesting about the movie, bro. In 1954, you're watching these. How many people saw themselves on that screen?
Well, still do.
Oh yeah, okay.
I mean, how many
still do?
How many people close the door in their apartment and they've gone out and faked it all day, and now they sit all alone all night with a TV dinner? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, people don't have TV dinners anymore, but your microwave dinner. I mean, like, we live in a this is the weird thing about the Facebook connected world is we are uber connected, and people feel often more connected or more disconnected.
Yeah, more disconnected. Yeah.
So lonely and isolated and. By the way Hitchcock directed all these people doing all these things in these scenes is they all had earpieces.
Oh, wow.
So he's talking them through all these actions.
Right.
And the other thing to keep in mind is when we're watching Jimmy Stewart react to all these things, he's reacting to nothing.
Yeah.
He's sitting alone with a camera in Hitchcock. Now, we talked today about people who are great green screen actors who have to see the dragon and see this and see that. Mm-hmm. Well, man, Jimmy Stewart, he has to know exactly what the eye line is for every one of these apartments.
Yeah.
And he has to, I don't know how they did it and how, was Hitchcock just talking him through the whole thing? Right. But his performance is stellar. I mean, it's so real, and you never for a moment think he's not seeing what he's seen.
Right. Yeah,
that's great. And in comes Lisa, and Jeff says,
Miss Lonely Hearts. Well, at least that's something you'll never have to worry about.
Oh. You can see my apartment from here all the way up on 63rd Street?
No, not exactly, but we have a little apartment here that's probably about as popular as yours. You remember, of course, Miss Torso, the ballet dancer? She's like a queen bee with her pick of the drones.
And we see her in her apartment, dressed beautifully with a bunch of men.
Yes,
all paying a lot of attention to her.
It's a weird moment, man.
It's really weird.
I've never been in a scene like that. I've never been in a situation like that.
Were there multiple men and one woman?
Where you're part of the multiple men trying to woo the same woman at the same time. I think that happened once, I guess, maybe in my life. And it was me and a couple other friends who were interested in a friend of ours' sister at a Christmas event at a friend's house. And we all tried to woo her. And in the end, she went with one of our guys and ended up marrying him and having kids with him. But it was like...
Congratulations.
Yeah, I guess to them, yes. But the three of us, 2 out of the 3 of us were communicating about the situation that was going on.
It's funny. I certainly have been in a room with multiple guys and an attractive woman.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it was so open.
But they're in her apartment.
Yeah.
So clearly, this is an attempt by all 3 of them to woo her. And I guess at that time, maybe that's how It was. I don't know if it is now, but certainly was.
You know, there's the When Harry Met Sally thing. You know, a man can't be friends with a woman he finds attractive without the sex thing getting
Right,
right.
right.
It's like anytime you have a bunch of guys and an attractive woman,
Yeah.
like there's gonna be some of that is there.
I guess you're right. Yeah.
Like to what degree it's there,
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, remember, It's a Wonderful Life, those two guys, when Violet's older, she sees Jimmy, and they go, "We'll wait for you, baby. We'll wait for you, baby." Because they want to be with her. They're desperate to be with her. Two dudes that trying to woo her at the same time.
Well, to be
And she
clear-
runs off with Jimmy Stewart.
I think something we've said many times in the Cine-Files
Or to be with Stewart.
is guys are horrible.
Yeah, true.
And this movie, for the most part, that's what's going on.
Yeah, kind of. You're right.
And Lisa's response to watching Miss Torso is she says,
I'd say she's doing a woman's hardest job, juggling wolves.
Lisa is so great at showing you a woman's perspective of everything.
yeah.
Her dialogue is fantastic.
Well, and in this moment, she's in like a power pose,
Yeah.
standing up. And she is so strong and powerful in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that, now Miss Torso's on the balcony. I hate calling her that, by the way, but that is literally her name in the movie. And there's like an older man. And Jeff's response is, well, she's done a good job. She's picked the most prosperous man here. And Lisa's like, no, she's not in love with him or any of them.
yeah.
And
she knows.
yeah, and he says, how can you tell from here? And she says,
You said it resembled my apartment, didn't you?
Wow.
that line, there's so much depth in this movie because, and I think, again, this is why it bears watching multiple times, is that the first time that maybe that kind of drifts past you. But now if you think about it, it's like, she said earlier that she had a cocktail party with a bunch of men before she came to see Jeff. We know that she's in love with Jeff. And so that means she was fending off wolves earlier in the day. And she also said she relates to Miss Lonely Heart, which I think she does, you know? And so it's like, there's all this sadness and pain with her. And is Jeff seeing it?
No.
Not even a little bit. And then what's the next thing we see is the closed shade on the honeymoon.
Yeah.
So again, it's the thought. We see the lonely woman. We see the woman being pursued by men who she does not love. And then we see the honeymoon.
Right.
Again, it's the thoughts within Jeff and Lisa being represented in this scene.
Yep.
And where do we go from the honeymoon? We go right to Raymond Bird or the Torvalds. So we go from lonely woman being pursued, the newlywed, the beginning, the honeymoon period of the relationship, to where the relationship has gone bad.
Yeah.
And this is where he's making her that dinner. He brings it to her. She tosses the flower, criticizes him. He leaves. He goes and gets on the phone in the other room. She gets out of the bed.
Yeah.
She goes towards, she's clearly listening to the conversation. We can't hear it. And it almost looks like two TV screens, the way it's framed.
Yeah.
You have these two windows side by side with a surface division between them.
Yeah.
And some people describe like this whole movie is like switching channels,
Oh, absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. From reality show to reality show.
Yep. And she realizes something as she's listening, and Jeff is watching this, and then she yells at him and crosses back into her room, and she seems to be mocking him and laughing at him. Now, again, we don't know who he was talking to.
Yeah.
Maybe he was talking to the other woman. Maybe, we don't know.
Yeah.
But in this moment, she doesn't seem very nice.
No.
And now we look up at the composer. And who is in the apartment with the composer? Alfred Hitchcock.
Right.
In one of his many cameos. And this time he is winding a clock or something like that. And the composer is playing some music, and this is what is going to become the theme of the film.
It's very meta.
Yeah, very much so. And the theme, of course, is called Lisa.
Right.
Or Lisa. I can't tell if which, because I think Jimmy Stewart calls her Lisa.
Yeah.
But I think she calls herself Lisa. I'm not sure. Maybe another sign that he's not
Is
paying
that
a lot.
Coleman or Goldman? Well, the G is silent.
The G is silent. When we're in Europe, it's Goldman or...
Still my favorite exchange. That movie.
Now, she loves the music and
Yeah.
says it's enchanting. And then she says, this is so awful. What happens next? She says,
It's almost as if it were being written especially for us.
and Jimmy Stewart's response is,
No wonder he's having so much trouble with it.
Oh, boom.
dude,
I know.
what is wrong? Like, listen, if you don't like the woman, dump her.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, right.
Like, don't just sit here and be mean to her.
Right. But then again, she's staying for the treatment. Why is she staying to be treated badly as well? It goes both ways.
Because she's Miss Lonely Hearts.
Well, right.
You know?
Right.
And then she says, you see her reaction to this, and then she says, at least you can't say the dinner isn't right. And he looks down at the dinner, and it is lobster.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what he commented on, can you see me eating lobster, earlier in the film. And he says,
Lisa, it's perfect. As always.
And again, she feels it.
Yeah.
She feels it. And later on, now we're kind of having the fight.
If you're saying all this because you don't want to tell me the truth, because you're hiding something from me, then maybe I can understand.
I'm not hiding anything. It's just that
It doesn't make sense. What's so different about it here from over there, or any place you go that one person couldn't live in both places just as easily?
And the basic fight is about he wants to go do what he wants to do, and she wants him to stay here. And she's talking over him a lot at the beginning.
What is it but traveling from one place to another taking pictures? This is like being a tourist on an endless vacation.
Okay, now that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. Now let me give you my
It's
side.
ridiculous to say that it can only be done by a special private little group of anointed people.
Which is not a good thing to say to a professional photographer.
True.
It's like you're traveling around taking pictures like a tourist or something. And he tries to explain, she interrupts. Then he says, shut up for a minute.
I made a simple statement. A true statement, but I can back it up if you just shut up for a minute.
And then she keeps talking. She says,
Well, if your opinion is as rude as your manner, I don't think I care to hear it.
Oh, come on, now simmer down.
I can't fit in here. You can't fit in there. I mean, according to you, people should be born, live, and die on the same spot.
Shut up!
not cool.
Nope.
And now his thing is like, have you ever eaten fish heads, which she hasn't? Have you ever flown at 15,000 feet trying to keep warm in like a C-17, which of course she hasn't? Have you been shot at? Have you been in the jungle? Which of course she hasn't done any of these things.
Right. Those high heels, they'll be great in the jungle, and the nylons and those 6-ounce lingerie.
3.
All right, it's 3. Well, they'll make a big hit in Finland just before you freeze to death.
I like her response, by the way, is,
Well, if there's one thing I know, it's how to wear the proper clothes.
That's a great line.
and, you know, they keep having this argument about what their lives are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, some of this is based on a photographer named Robert Capa, who was in a relationship with Ingrid Bergman.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't want to stop doing his world traveling photography, and that is why their relationship ended.
Yeah.
Again, Ingrid Bergman. And we finally get to, you can't stay here and I can't go with you. And he says, I don't think it would be the right thing.
You don't think either one of us could ever change?
Right now, it doesn't seem so.
Now, this is breakup talk.
Yeah.
Right? This is a breakup.
Yeah.
And she says goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Jeff.
Well, you mean good night?
I mean what I said.
Yeah, man. Strong statement there.
That's a breakup.
Yep.
Right?
That is a breakup.
And what's funny is he wasn't, I will say, man enough
Right.
to break up with her.
Right.
He's trying to get her to break up with him.
Yes, exactly. He's poking and poking and poking and being denigrating to these visions she has of the future and criticizing them because he wants to drive her away without having to be the bad guy.
And then still, and this is what's so awful, the next thing he said is, couldn't we, just keep things the status quo?
Right.
What does that line mean?
Well, obviously, it's comfortable, the relationship he has with her now at this level. The fact that she wants to go to the next level with him because they've been together for God knows how long, it is not what he wants supposedly, and it unsettles him. And he's just happy having things perfectly placed in certain places in his world so that he can function running off and doing whatever. He wants the world to work in a certain way, the way he wants it to work, so that he can selfishly keep being who he's being at this time in his life.
Seems like a classic, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free, which is a horrible, old expression.
Right.
But basically he's like, can't we keep fooling around, but I have no commitments or responsibilities to you whatsoever?
Exactly.
Like, why can't we, and then I can go and do whatever I want and you just have to wait for me?
It's the immature rantings of a child.
Yes. My note, by the way, after that line in my notes is asshole.
Well, when am I going to see you again?
And she says, not for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Pause. At least not until tomorrow night.
Interesting.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad. And she leaves. And what does he do? He turns around to look at his neighbors.
Of course.
Um,
TV's on.
And then there's a exactly. And there's a scream and broken glass. And he hears it, and we fade to black. Now it's the middle of the night. It's thunder. It's raining. There's that couple sleeping on the balcony. They get caught in the rain, which is some great comedy as they kind of stumble in through the window. And Jeff smiles. And then they fall through the window. The guy falls over the window, and Jeff laughs. So we get a little bit of our comedy. Then he looks down, and Raymond Burr is leaving the apartment with a big, heavy silver briefcase.
Yeah.
By the way, important tip to all you filmmakers out there, put something in the briefcase. I've seen so many times where they're carrying that piece of luggage and they just like lift it up.
Yeah,
It's like, no, make it heavy. You know, it's the same reason like when you have your character's drink, put some liquid in the cup.
Yeah.
Things look different. And there's definitely something heavy in that briefcase. And he watches him walk out, turn the corner, looks at his watch. Again, classic Hitchcock storytelling. It's 1:55 in the morning.
Yeah.
Fade out, fade in. It's now 2:34 in the morning. Raymond Burr returns. Same time the composer has come home drunk, knocks his score off his piano and immediately falls down. And Raymond Burr goes back into his apartment and then is leaving again with a heavy suitcase. Jeff thinks, watches him walks into the street. Jeff thinks some more, and we fade out.
Yeah.
Now he's asleep. He wakes up, looks across, sees closed windows, takes a drink. Light turns on and in Miss Torso's apartment. And she is forcibly saying goodnight to someone who is trying to get in through the door.
Yeah.
Scary.
It's unsettling, yeah.
Yeah. And again, we have this thing, it was women as victims, which goes throughout Hitchcock films. But particularly in this one, I think we're really seeing that.
Yeah.
And he watches her. Then he looks down to see Raymond Burr return and then back up to Miss Torso, who's in the bathroom. It's a very, very intimate moment that he's spying on.
Yeah.
And of course, we see that Raymond Burr's apartment is right next to Miss Torso's apartment. And he goes into his apartment and Jeff falls asleep and fades out. Comes back on. It's early morning. The camera pans off sleeping Jeff. And this is really important.
Yeah.
He does not see the next thing that happens. We see Raymond Burr leaving with a woman in black. And the camera comes back to Jeff to show that he is still sleeping. Again, this is the tight Hitchcock storytelling. Next morning, our sunbather is sculpting some weird modern art piece of sculpture. Someone asked what it is, and she says it's called Hunger. Miss Torso is dancing, and now we see another little important bit of this piece, which is the wife from the people that were sleeping on that fire escape is lowering down a dog in a basket.
Yeah.
It's a great little bit. And it gets out of the basket to go do its business. What a great bit. I think that's just kind of awesome how they train that dog.
Right? It knows what to do, and it gets back in the basket. Puts the lotion in the
It
basket.
does put the lotion in the basket. I got your dog, mister. And we're back to Stella massaging Jimmy Stewart, and she's a little pissed off because it's very clear that he slept in the wheelchair rather than the bed.
Must have been watching out that window for hours.
Yeah, it was.
What are you going to do if one of them catches you?
Yeah, depends which one. Now, Miss Torso, for example.
You keep your mind off her.
It's creepy. That's a creepy kind of thing to say.
Well, she sure is the eat, drink, and be merry girl.
Now, last night, he literally saw a dude trying to force his way into her apartment. And now he's describing her as the eat, drink, be merry girl. Like his image of her, despite what he saw last night, is still just she's a party girl. Like when Lisa said the thing about her fending off wolves, he did not hear that.
Nope.
He's seen her just that same way.
Because he's been a wolf.
Well, and this is why I say this is not 2018. That's Hitchcock's intention. That is very clear to me.
Oh,
the
right.
Storytelling.
No, of course.
You know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah, no, very good point.
And Stella's like, stay away from her. She's going to end up fat, sad alcoholic, which is brutal.
Yeah.
And we hear that Miss Lonely Hearts drank herself to sleep again.
Poor soul. Oh, well. Maybe one day she'll find her happiness.
Well, some man will lose his.
What a dick.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is who we... Right? This is what makes the film still so topical. How many of us watch other people's lives and judge by snapshots, judge by watching them interact in certain situations or watching their reactions on Twitter or on Instagram or any kind of social media, and you go, oh, I figured this person out. This is the person. They're like this. And because from my judgment, I know. Like, it's the vanity of our own judgment. It's the vanity of our own analysis that motivates making offhand comments like that and thinking they're funny.
Well, and what's interesting is, well, two things. One is I couldn't agree more. It's so often that you see someone, they say a thing on Twitter or on Facebook or they have a quote in the news or something, and like, oh, that person is a racist, a troll, a sexist, a homophobe or whatever it is. And it's like, look, you don't know that guy, and once it's, and once it's out there, like it's very hard, people's lives are ruined by this one, there's that book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John.
Oh, yeah, that came out recently.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. Yeah. It's a really upsetting book. And there's the story in it, sorry, it's a brief digression, about the woman who got on the plane to South Africa.
Yeah.
And she leaves Heathrow Airport and she tweets to her like 32 Twitter followers, going off to Africa, I hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white.
Jesus.
Which and I really believe this, her intention was to make fun of a person that would say that horrible joke. You know what I mean? Like that was she was mocking this ridiculous idea that some people might feel that way. She leaves, she's on the plane, she lands from the plane, she is the #1 trending thing on Twitter. She's been fired from her job. She has 20,000 messages on her machine. Her life is completely fallen apart. And essentially that woman has never recovered.
Yeah.
In the book checks in with her like 7 years later. She still has, trouble finding work everywhere she goes. You do a Google search for her, that is the first thing that comes up. So she is a well-known racist for making this, and of course that was a bad joke.
Yes,
you shouldn't have said that. It was not, but she thought she was saying it to her 32 Twitter friends. It's like all of us have said things that we shouldn't have said.
Sure.
And that will haunt her forever. The other thing I was going to say is that here he is making these judgments about these people, and many of them incorrect.
Yeah.
And it's also a movie about this one judgment he makes about this guy that is correct.
Yeah.
But it really could just as easily be incorrect.
Yes.
And that's what we get to right now, because now he's kind of talking about this salesman who's splitting up. Maybe he's splitting up with his wife, and what was he doing with his sample case out in the middle of the night? What could he be selling? To which Stellar's response is,
flashlights.
Yeah.
She's so funny.
I love that.
And Stella thinks, oh no, the coward is going to run out on her. And Jeff's response to that is, sometimes it's worse to stay than to run.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I mean, look, there are times for marriages to end.
Yes, of course.
That's just reality. But his view of marriage is really represented by the Torvalds.
Yeah.
That's what, and we see it when he looks from place to place, is he sees sex with Miss Torso, honeymoon with the honeymooners, and then actual marriage with Torvalds.
Right.
That's what marriage is like in his mind. And this morning, all the shades are drawn, so we can't see anything of them. And except Stella says, well, looks like he's up now. And he turns, and there's Raymond Burr. And immediately Jeff goes, get back, and pulls back into the shadows. It's kind of scary because Raymond Burr is looking out the window.
Yeah.
And he analyzes what his look is. He says,
it's no ordinary look. It's a kind of a look a man gives when he's afraid somebody might be watching him.
Wow.
And it does look that way. Certainly does look that way. And the salesman looks down, and Jeff comes forward to see what he's interested in. And what do we see? The dog sniffing at that flower bed.
Yep.
Little details. Stella tries to say goodbye. He goes, and she says, don't sleep in the chair again. And he says,
Stella, take those binoculars out of the case and bring them here, will you?
Trouble. I can smell it. Glad when they crack that cast and I can get out of here.
And he says, and he pulls up the binoculars, and now we go into the closer shot, and we see it's irised, which means there's a little black round circle around it, which really goes back to the silent film era, but also shows that we're looking through the binoculars.
Yeah.
And we see that Raymond Burr is reloading his sample case. Oh, and I should have said before, he was cleaning his sample case.
Yes.
Interesting. And Jeff thinks that's interesting too. And I think this is the moment that he first has the thought. I think this is where it first hits him.
It's been he's
building.
Yeah, the pieces are there, and he hasn't quite put them together.
And now he goes, And now he goes, man, I really need to see this closer. So what does he do? He wheels over to a drawer, pulls out a big, long telephoto lens, attaches it to his camera, rests it on his knee, and now we're into the poster.
Yeah.
Now we see Jimmy Stewart looking through that long lens, and what does he see of Raymond Burr? He's got some newspaper, he's got a little saw, and a nasty-looking carving knife.
Yeah.
that he's wrapping up.
Oh my God.
Yep. He lowers the lens. He raises it up. We see Raymond Burr stretch, yawn, and lie down on a couch.
Yep.
And Jeff thinks, and we fade out. Again, this is the master storyteller.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I think I said it during our Hitchcock episode, but I think Spielberg studies at the feet of Hitchcock.
Oh, that's great.
You know, like that's because Spielberg is today's master storyteller. The composer is, up touching his piano. We pan up to the family. We don't stay at the family.
No.
Interesting enough, the happy family is the one thing Jeff is not interested in spying on.
Oh, of course, there's no drama there.
Yeah. Well, and it's not what he wants to see.
Exactly.
It's like his view of the world is that marriage is the Torvalds. It can't go be the happy family.
Well, I wonder if this is Hitchcock's jab also at people who wanted to see these happy, feel-good movies. And
Maybe.
And he's showing you what people actually really want to see, and that's the drama and conflict.
We hear whistling, and this is often in this film, is that sound leads us to vision. So he hears a sound, so he turns and looks out the window, and that leads us to see the woman whistling for her dog. The dog runs back into the basket to go up. Very important. Miss Lonely Heart is sewing. Miss Torso is brushing her hair. The sculptor is sculpting. The newlywed shade is still closed. And the camera pans up to Jeff and Lisa kissing. And the first thing she says is, what does a girl have to do for you to notice her? I mean, it's Grace Kelly, dude. Like, either make out with Grace Kelly or don't.
Right.
I find this very frustrating.
Clearly, I know.
I don't really. I really do think she is among the most beautiful women, particularly in this movie, ever on film.
Undeniable.
Yeah.
It's an undeniable thought.
I really wonder, it's like Hitchcock giving Jimmy Stewart directions, like, wait, you want me to do what? You want me to kiss Grace Kelly and ignore her simultaneously? That's tough.
Yeah.
Well, if she's pretty enough, she doesn't have to go anywhere. She just has to be.
Which, by the way, is totally untrue for Jimmy Stewart's character. We're going to see later on, she does have to do something for her. It will be her doing stuff that does get him to notice her. And then she actually says, pay attention to me.
Well, I'm not exactly on the other side of the room.
Your mind is. And when I want a man, I want hold of you.
I mean, she can't be more obvious than she is being.
Of course.
In fact, this film is quite clear on sex. I mean, in addition to him spying on Miss Torso, and we have the newlyweds behind the curtain, and we have Miss Lonely Hearts, we know what she wants.
Yeah.
But our main character, Grace Kelly, she's clearly wants sex.
Yep.
I mean, she brought him to 21 and lobster dinner the night before.
Yeah.
Now she's back again, making out with him. And it says, when I want a man, I want all of him. And he asks, don't you ever have any problems? Her response is, I have one now. And he says, so do I. Doesn't actually care about what her problem is.
Right, right.
And finally she says, tell me about it. And he goes into, why would a man leave his apartment 3 times on a rainy night with a suitcase and come back 3 times? She relates it to the wife. Maybe he likes the way his wife welcomes him home, because that's what she wants.
Always thinking the best. Yeah, right, exactly.
And he says, not this salesman's wife. And she says, well, maybe working at home is more interesting. Again, a reference to sex.
Yeah.
What's interesting about a butcher knife and a small saw wrapped in newspaper, huh?
Nothing, thank you.
And then we find out that he hasn't been in the wife's room all day. In fact, he hasn't been in the wife's room since we heard the scream.
Yeah.
There's something terribly wrong.
And I'm afraid it's with me.
And she gets up. Like, finally, she gets the point.
Yeah.
And again, this is where I just keep going like, dude, if you don't love her, break up with her. What do you do? Like the last time he said, can't we keep it status quo? Well, status quo is torturing her.
Yeah.
It's really horrible. Yeah. She smokes, and he looks right out at Miss Torso.
Yeah.
Who's in a kind of sexy pose in the bed. Which, again, not cool. Like, you're with your woman, and you're just going to stare at some woman across, in some bed.
Right.
And he's just going through his thought process, and his line is,
That'd be a terrible job to tackle.
She doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Just how would you start to cut up a human body?
All right, she's done. She turns on the light and says, you're beginning to scare me.
Yeah.
And then he goes, she's coming back, and there is Raymond Burr. And he comes back with a rope.
Oh, God.
I mean, how
How obvious do you have to be?
Yeah. Which, of course, later we find out has nothing to do with the body.
Exactly. It's so ironic.
But it sure looks like it's something scary.
It's a great misdirection by Hitchcock.
Yeah. Jeff grabs his binoculars, and she grabs him by the wheelchair and turns him around and says, if you could only see yourself, this is diseased. Which,
she's right.
totally right.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he ends up being right about the murder does not change the fact that for 6 weeks he's been spying on his neighbors.
Yeah.
What do you think? I'd consider it recreation?
Yes, we do think that. Like we're fairly
it's
clear.
pretty much, yeah.
That's what you've been doing.
You can lie to her. You can't lie to us who've been watching you do it. Yeah.
And she lays down the law. If you don't stop this, I'm out of here. And he's trying to explain about the wife. She was an invalid, constant care, but he hasn't been in to see her.
Right.
And she goes, well, maybe she died. And he goes, okay, if she died, where's the doctor? Where's the ambulance?
Yeah.
And now we bring up the knives and the saw and the ropes. And she shoots it down.
Lots of people have knives and saws and ropes around their houses. And lots of men don't speak to their wives all day. Lots of wives nag and men hate them and trouble starts. But very, very few of them end up in murder, if that's what you think.
All perfectly logical. And then she goes on like a murderer wouldn't be parading around with his knives and his saws. He would hide these things. And really, I really think I would love to see a different movie where you do exactly this movie, except there is no murder. Because everything that is said, like by Doyle, the detective, is correct. We don't know what went on.
Right.
This woman, all the evidence that they have is totally circumstantial. There could be explanations for it. And really, this is a guy who is completely voyeuring, peeping on his neighbors in ways that are quite invasive at certain points.
Yeah. Plus, he has a tendency, because of what we saw at the beginning of the movie in his conversation with his boss, to seek the most dramatic of situations.
Yep.
So he could be the one creating this whole thing that's happening because that's what he's used to covering. That's what he's used to seeing. So his wild imaginings may be what's fueling what he's doing. And I think that's one of the great things about this movie, Steve, is that you think he's right, but these other people coming in have validity about their opinions and their feelings about what this guy's doing.
Because we really don't see very much.
Right.
Why, for all you know, there's probably something a lot more sinister going on behind those windows.
Pointing to the closed shades and the newlyweds. His response is no comment.
Yeah.
It's a funny bit. And then she stands up and she looks and he looks at her and then he turns, grabs the pair of binoculars. And in this moment, usually in Hitchcock films, we know more than the characters know.
Yep.
We're ahead of them. In this moment, they're ahead of us. They've seen something. We don't know what it is. Finally, we do see it. And what do we see? A big trunk tied up with those ropes.
Yep.
Lisa turns to him and says,
Let's start from the beginning again, Jeff. Tell me everything you saw and what you think it means.
Fade out. That is a major turn in our story.
Yep.
Is that suddenly someone else believes him.
Yeah. She's now on board.
So not only is Lisa on board, she's willing to do a little legwork for Jeff.
This is madness.
I mean, this first one's not so bad, which is she's just gone down to find out the name, his name and what the actual address is. Not too bad.
No.
It's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it is.
he says thank you, and she asks for her next assignment. Here's my question.
Yeah.
Is she, A, just really intrigued by this murder thing and the mystery and wanting to solve it? Or B, knowing that he wants a woman who can go with him on adventures, deciding to go on an adventure to show him that she can be the kind of woman he wants her to be?
Jesus, I've never gotten that far.
Or a combo.
Yeah, maybe. Look, this is this is what we do on the Cine-Files, is our analysis, our objective opinion, what we think's happening. So for me, I think this is why she's with him, even with the abuse. She likes that he's not a stay-at-home guy. She likes that he's got these world adventures and thrilling things, because she probably doesn't go and do much other than what she does there in New York, being part of the world that she's in. So now this is a way for her to be part of his world a little bit and see and them working together. It's also a way for her to be with him more, where he's more alive in the situation and paying attention to her and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
right or wrong, it just feels like that's what's happening.
Yeah, to me, it's clearly both. I think this does turn her on. I think she is excited about this and about the mystery. I think she is not happy in her life as much as it is fabulous and amazing.
Absolutely.
So I think this is really, but I think also in her mind, she also knows, like, okay, I had no luck seducing him with the lobster and 21 and kissing and my beautiful dresses. And like, he's clearly interested in this thing.
All the other tactics that have worked with other men are not working with him.
Would work easy. I mean, Grace Kelly shows up at my door with lobster. Sure. Honestly, she didn't even need the lobster. She could have like a pack of Doritos and a Sprite. And I'd be like, okay.
Sure. The sweatpants.
I love sweatpants.
Right.
And she asks, because she still wants to know what's going on. She asks, what's he doing right now? Yeah. And he's just sitting there. And we see, what do we see of him? Just the tiny light of a cigar in the dark.
Yeah.
Great. Next day, he's calling his buddy Doyle, who is a detective, on the phone.
Doyle is great.
And saying like, no, Doyle asks, is important. It's like, well, if nothing important, just a neighborhood murder.
Yeah.
And he's not nice. He's not even nice to this guy. He's just trying to throw a little business your way.
I figured a good detective would jump at the chance of something to detect.
And Doyle says he'll stop by, and in comes Stella serving him breakfast. And she's obviously already kind of on board with this too, because she goes,
Just where do you suppose he cut her up? Of course, the bathtub. That's the only place where he could have washed away the blood.
as she says this, he is trying to eat a slice of bacon. That immediately puts him off his bacon.
Yeah.
And she now he's drinking some coffee, and the next thing she says is,
You better get that trunk out of there before it starts to leak.
He does a little spit take. I love Hitchcock's little bits of comedy.
Well, they're very Shakespearean, right? When Shakespeare would throw in those moments of comedy, those comic relief characters in the middle of all this tragedy, like in Macbeth. Like there's always his dark tragedies always have this like comic relief situation. It's so funny.
And then his mental thought process is very clear. He goes from Miss Lonely Hearts to Miss Torso up to the Newlywed screen. So he thinks of sex with Miss Torso, goes to look at where the actual sex is happening, and now the shade opens.
Yeah.
And the man leans out, and the wife calls him back in.
He looks exhausted.
He looks exhausted.
Yeah.
Well, again, and what's going on with him and Lisa?
Right.
She is the aggressor sexually, and he is the resistor.
Yeah.
And now we see the representation of that with our newlyweds.
Yeah.
And now we're back to Raymond Burr, and there's some delivery guys coming to pick up the trunk. And he's got a 2-day growth of his beard. By the way, his beard is just black, which just doesn't quite match that white hair. And we're upset because we're hoping that Doyle, the detective, would get here before the trunk. And Stella goes, well, I'm going to go get the name on the trunk. She runs down. Yeah. We see Raymond Burr make a phone call, which Jeff can tell is long distance. And we see the trunk driving away on a truck and a great shot of Stella in the long lens pointing and shaking her head no. She didn't get to see it.
That's right.
Now we have Tom Doyle, our detective. The actor's name is Wendell Corey. And again, he just rips apart everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you didn't see a killing. You didn't see a body. How do you know there was a murder? And he's kind of explaining about knives and trunks and weird sounds. And Doyle's buying none of it. This is a stupid way to commit a murder. Yeah. The stuff he is doing is stupid. We have morons throughout the city who are way tougher murders to solve than this.
Right.
Why is he still sitting around the apartment? All of this, he goes, there's probably a very normal explanation. The wife took a trip.
His wife was sick in bed.
Which we saw the wife get up and yell at him.
Yeah.
It's like, she's not that sick.
No.
But Doyle does say, okay, I'm going to poke around. And the next thing he says is really interesting. He says, no sense in you getting a lot of publicity. He's actually trying to protect Jeff.
Of course.
Because if Jeff makes an open, stupid accusation and it's not true, it could ruin him. So he's like, no, this is dumb. Let me poke a little around quietly. Yeah. And as he's leaving, he says, have you had any headaches lately? And Jeff says, not until you showed up. Again, he's a dick.
Yeah.
This guy came down to help him.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, in Jeff's defense, he has been sitting in the same place for 6 weeks.
I mean, you do get irritable, right?
Yeah, you get irritable.
Yeah, but cabin fever.
And Doyle says, well, the headache will wear off along with the hallucinations. And he walks out, and we hear a dog whining. And again, sound leads us to have the camera and Jeff look out the window, and there's that dog digging at the flowers. And Thorvald comes out, and he sees the dog, and he very nicely, I think, actually pushes the dog away. He is not mean to the dog.
Not yet.
And Jeff watches that, and then he watches Doyle, who's looking around, and now Doyle is back in the apartment with some info. He says, okay, they had a 6-month lease. It's 5.5 months out. The guy's a drinker, but he's not a drunk. He sells costume jewelry, and that the wife and the husband left the apartment at 6 a.m., which, of course, is we saw him leave with a woman at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And we saw that Jeff was asleep then.
Who said they left then?
Who left where?
The Thorwalds at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, the building superintendent and 2 tenants. Flat statements, no hesitation. They jived to the letter.
And now Jeff's like, well, they were bribed, or he's trying to knock down those theories because he is convinced of what he saw.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? Are you interested in solving this case or in making me look foolish?
Well, if possible, both.
And again, Doyle is cutting him apart. He's like, well, just go search the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, there's a constitution and there are laws. I can't do that. And he goes, well, what do you need to search the apartment? It's like, well, we need some evidence. He goes, well, go get a search warrant. Right. And he goes, yeah, I'm going to go to the judge and say, Your Honor, I have a friend who's an amateur sleuth. They'll throw the penal code out in my face. And it's 6 volumes.
What do you need before you can search? Tell me now, what do you need? Bloody footsteps leading up to the door?
One thing I don't need is heckling. You call me and ask for help. I'm behaving like a taxpayer.
Yep.
I love that line.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks, how did we stand each other in the war? And then the last thing he says is, oh, by the way, there was a postcard in his mailbox from Anna.
Is that Anna? Is that who I think it is?
Mrs. Thorwald.
And when he exits, he says, anything you need, Jeff? And Jeff says, you might send me a good detective.
Oh.
Yeah, he's an asshole.
Yeah.
Well, and this is back to your earlier point. This is why you cast Jimmy Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jimmy Stewart is among the most likable people in film history.
Of course.
And so we do like him. But when you kind of objectively look at his actions in this film.
No.
He's
We
bad.
default to try to understand him and forgive him for being a jerk.
Yeah. And then we
Like
get
Grace does.
Yeah, exactly right. And then we get a massive, massive itch as an opera aria is rising to a climax. And again, the satisfaction of him scratching that itch with that back scratcher is awesome. It's night. He's got a sandwich with his telephoto lens.
Yeah.
Now this is fully, watching TV and eating dinner.
Yeah.
We see the dog go down. We see Miss Lonely Heart getting ready. Bright green dress. She's checking her makeup.
Yeah.
I love, by the way, she takes a drink. She picks up her glasses. She puts on the glasses to fix her makeup, then takes the glasses off. Yeah. Because she clearly needs them and doesn't see well.
Yeah.
But she can't wear her glasses when she's going out.
Right.
And she walks towards the door, pours herself one more drink before going out, and she goes out. Up in the composer's apartment, a party is starting. A dance teacher is with Miss Torso. We see Miss Lonely Heart on the street. Mm-hmm. The song that's playing from the party upstairs is Waiting for My True Love to Appear.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She walks into a restaurant. Fortunately, there's a table right in the window, directly centered in the alley where Jeff can look out with his telephoto lens and watch her sit down at the table. And we know what she's out for. She is out to pick up a man.
Yep.
And just as we're watching her sit at this restaurant, who walks into frame? But Torvald, Raymond Burr, with a box in his hand from the laundry. And now Jeff is very interested, follows him back up to his apartment where he opens up the laundry box, pulls out some clean laundered shirts, pulls a bunch of shirts out in the drawer, and we realize that he is starting packing.
Yep.
Jeff reacts, calls up Doyle's house. His wife answers, and he's like, it's really important. Have him call me. Thorwald is pulling out tonight. And I like at the very end of the conversation, he's like, no, he'll know who Thorwald is. Don't worry, it's a man.
Jesus.
So he's telling the guy's wife
Yeah.
that he's not calling him about an affair.
Yeah.
And then we see Thorwald sit down. He's dialing the phone, again, long distance, and he has a purse, and he's pulling jewelry out of the purse, including 2 or 3 rings, one of which looks like an engagement ring, and one of which definitely looks like a wedding ring.
Yeah.
Up at the composer's apartment, more and more partygoers are showing up. And now Lisa enters, just like Miss Lonely Hearts, wearing a beautiful green dress.
Yeah.
A more beautiful green dress, I would say. And he doesn't really notice her because he's telling her that Thorwald's ready to pull out for good. And explains about the clothes being laid out on the bed, explains about the alligator handbag, describes the jewelry. and then he says he's asking for advice over the phone.
Right.
How does he know he's asking for advice?
I don't know.
He doesn't know that.
No.
And he's talking to someone who's not his wife. How does he know he's talking to someone who's not his wife?
Right.
He doesn't know that either. And we see Raymond Burr turn off the lights and exit. And of course, Lisa's like, okay, we can put the lights on now. He's like, no, let's wait. And they realize that he's maybe turned the other way. And they finally turn it on. She crosses around the room, turning on the lights. She's been thinking about this.
Yeah.
And this new information, she's fully on board at this point.
Oh, yeah.
A woman has a favorite handbag, and it always hangs on her bedpost where she can get at it easily. And then all of a sudden she goes away on a trip and leaves it behind. Why?
Because she didn't know she was going on a trip, and where she's going, she wouldn't need the handbag.
And that jewelry. Women don't keep their jewelry in a purse getting all twisted and scratched and tangled up.
Will they hide in their husband's clothes?
They do not.
This is a great line. This whole thing she talks about is brilliant.
I totally agree. And I also think it's all just speculation because we don't know that's her favorite handbag. That could be her least favorite handbag.
Could be.
You know? And no, not all women actually do leave their handbag on the bedpost. I love the speech.
No, but the idea of having a favorite handbag.
Yes.
That's very true.
Why, a woman going anywhere but the hospital would always take makeup, perfume, and jewelry.
Now, this was an invalid. She could be going to the hospital. You know?
Yeah.
That's where it's like, you know, you base your logic on a bunch of like he's calling long distance, not talking to his wife, getting advice. That's her favorite handbag.
These are all things you would do. Yeah.
Yeah. But now she's completely convinced. And this is when Jimmy Stewart tells her, well, Doyle says he left with a woman at 6 a.m.
Well, I have a pat rebuttal for Mr. Doyle. That couldn't have been Mrs. Thorwald.
Oh?
Or I don't know women.
Well, what about the witnesses?
We'll agree they saw a woman. But she was not Mrs. Thorwald. That is, not yet.
So now, with a very subtle line, Lisa has said the plot.
Yeah.
He's having an affair with another woman. That's who he left with.
Yeah.
And what does Jimmy Stewart do when she does this? He says, come here.
Yeah.
And she does this beautiful spin and ends up in his lap.
Yep.
So the first moment that he behaves romantically towards her is when she is fully on board in his adventure.
Yeah.
That's now suddenly he is interested in a way he was never interested before. But he's still going, man, I wish Doyle would show up. And her response is, don't rush him. We have all night.
We have all what?
Night. I'm going to stay with you.
Now, we just saw Miss Lonely Heart go decide to make a big move to get a man, to get dressed up, to put on the right. I think that's exactly what Lisa has done. She is Miss Lonely Heart.
Okay.
What did she do? They had a big fight last we saw them. She said, you know, I'm not going to see you again until tomorrow night.
Right.
You know, and now she went home. She thought about it all day. I mean, she did have this little adventure before looking up the address. And now she has packed a bag with her negligee and decided that she's going to spend the night with a man.
Right.
Which in 1954, this is a big move. And he thinks it's a big move.
Well, you'll have to clear that with my landlord.
Which is interesting that this was a world where you weren't allowed to have a visitor
overnight guest without letting the landlord know.
Yeah. And then the next thing he says,
oh, it's very nice, but I just have one bed.
And she says, if you say anything else, I'll stay tomorrow too.
Right.
What a fascinating threat.
Yep.
I won't be able to give you any pajamas.
And she smiles and she gets up and she picks up her very tiny suitcase that is very elegant and makes a comment on traveling with one suitcase and opens it up. And there is a very beautiful pink nightgown. And now what do we hear at that moment? But Lisa from the composer, the song with her name. Of course, we don't really know that's what the name of it is.
There's that song again.
And the party up there at that composer's is just raging. And she, listening to the song, says,
Where does a man get inspiration to write a song like that?
Jeff's response,
well, he gets it from the landlady once a month.
Classy.
Yep.
And then Grace Kelly sits down in a pose, lounging, that is just like a perfect pose. She says,
Wish I could be creative.
Oh, sweetie, you are. You have a great talent for creating difficult situations.
I do.
Sure. Yeah. Staying here all night uninvited.
Not welcoming.
Right.
And her response, which I love, is surprise is the most important element of attack. And then we talk about the Girl Friday. That's always when a person's having an adventure, there's always the Girl Friday. And Jeff's response is,
But he never ends up marrying her, does he? That's strange.
Weird.
not cool, man. And she says she's going to slip into something more comfortable. And he wants some coffee.
Yeah.
And what do we see then? He looks out the window. And again, we see the groom of the newlyweds and getting called back by the wife. Again, the tension of the wife being the aggressor in the sexual situation, directly mirroring what's happening in his life at that moment. And who walks in, because apparently we don't have locks on doors, is in walks Doyle.
Doyle, yep.
And the first thing he notices when he comes in is he hears Grace Kelly singing, and he sees her shadow. And Jeff sees him seeing this.
Yeah.
He looks up at the party that's packed where the composer's apartment. He looks down at the dark window of the Torvalds and finally asks Jeff what he's got. And Jeff explains that he's packed and ready to leave. And Lisa enters with some brandy snifters. Doyle just stares at her, as you would. There's an introduction, and Lisa's first thing that she says is,
"We think Thorwald's guilty."
Yeah. And what does Tom see in that moment? The suitcase with the nightgown.
Yep.
And I love, and of course, Jeff sees, because again, this is all about seeing things. So he sees the suitcase with the nightgown. Jeff sees him seeing the suitcase with the nightgown, and he says,
"Careful, Tom."
in a very sort of warning voice.
Yep.
The phone rings, and it's for Doyle. He picks it up and gives a sort of, yeah, got it. Okay, thanks, and hangs up. Nobody asks him about what this phone call was.
Right.
And Lisa says, we'll tell him about the jewelry. And they kind of go about the jewelry and the handbag. And obviously there's only one conclusion, that it's not Mrs. Torvald who left this morning, because women don't leave their jewelry behind. And this isn't really working on Doyle.
Yeah.
He walks in this really strong move straight up into a close-up in the camera and says,
Lars Thorwald is no more a murderer than I am.
and Jeff's like, well, does that mean you can explain everything? And he's like, no, I don't have to explain everything. That's not the point. People do all sorts of weird stuff. Like, they have a right to private lives, and we don't have to have explanations. Yes, the guy has a knife and a saw. People have knives and saws. Yes, he went out in the rain. He goes through all the stuff.
Yeah.
And he did check the train, and there really was a woman who went onto the train. He says, they go, well, what about the trunk? He's like, yeah, I found the trunk. Well, what about the rope? Well, it has a broken lock. Well, what's in the trunk? It's filled with all of the wife's clothes. He's like, well, did you send him to the lab? No. I sent it on its perfectly legal way.
Yeah.
You know, and they ask, well, why did she take everything he owns? And I like this, is he goes, well, let's have the female intuition answer. And she says, well, because she's not planning on coming back.
Yeah.
And then Jeff asks, well, did he tell his landlord? I mean, if they're moving out, did he tell his landlord? I think he's hiding something. To which Tom's response, looking at that suitcase, is,
Do you tell your landlord everything?
and there's a pause. And then in a really warning tone, he says,
I told you to be careful, Tom.
but this proves the point. You know, it's like, it proves the point that it's like, no, you didn't tell you're up to something here right now here, and you don't want anyone to know about it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
This is my contention, that Jeff is the flip side of Torvald, only that, but without committing the murder. He's just as entitled, just as, I don't know. It just feels that way to me, that he's not that much more different than Torvald. Just, he doesn't commit a murder.
And if someone was staring into Jeff's apartment from across the road, who knows what story they would make up about what's going on in there.
Absolutely.
You know, you see this woman coming and going. You see, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Certainly the big story you would make up is this guy is a peeping Tom and should be arrested for staring into people's windows.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we get this little kind of strange bit of backstory at that moment, which is Doyle says, if I was carefully piloting that reconnaissance play, you wouldn't have taken that picture. So this is clearly in the war, in a plane, the beginning of him being a photographer happened with this guy, Tom.
Which made him famous.
And Tom's still trying to make this night. Let's just sit and have a drink and tell war stories. But that's not going to happen. Yeah. He catches it real quickly because Lisa walks over to Jeff. And he goes, oh, it's you against me? And he goes, okay, I'm going to go home. And I love, by the way, he tries to take a sip of the brandy out of the brandy snifter and kind of spills it on his chest just to add a little bit of comedy. And he heads out, but as he's leaving, he goes,
Oh, the telephone call. I gave him your number. Hope you don't mind.
Well, depends who they were.
The police at Marriottsville. They reported the trunk was just picked up by Mrs. Anna Thorwald.
and he leaves. And we're left in silence. And what do we do when we're left in silence? Look out the window.
Yep.
There's Miss Torso exercising. Miss Lonely Heart shows up with a guy.
Yeah.
They watch. The song, by the way, is Mona Lisa, the famous Nat King Cole song,
Right.
Although not being sung by him. Miss Lonely Heart pours a drink for this guy. And it's basically she's doing the fantasy that we saw earlier in the movie. He kisses her rather forcefully.
Yeah.
We see Lisa watching, and her reaction very, very different from what Jeff's is.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Lonely Heart closes the shades, but not so much that we can't see from our angle.
Right.
Which again is like you have to direct your actor to close it exactly this many turns. What does it mean that Miss Lonely Heart closes the shades?
What does it mean to you?
That she's going to have sex with him.
Yeah.
That's what it means to me. Is that she's made this decision, but it does not go well.
No.
He grabs her very forcefully. He pushes her down on the couch very, very hard. She starts resisting. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
We're watching a rape. And you see Lisa's expression and you see Jeff's expression and the helplessness and the like, I can't stop looking. I can't, I don't want to look.
Right.
I can't turn away. She slaps him, pushes him away, and she shouts at him and drives him out of the apartment.
Yep.
And he does leave. And then she closed the door and she starts crying as soon as the door is closed.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's this great counterpuntal contrast with the sound of Mona Lisa at the party that's just got this crescendo at the moment that she's breaking down and crying and she falls on the couch.
Yeah.
And it's so brutal. And you could see for the first time that Jeff feels bad about spying on this very private, very intimate moment.
Yeah.
And he turns around.
You know, much as I hate to give Thomas J. Doyle too much credit, he might have gotten a hold of something when he said that was pretty private stuff going on out there.
Yeah. Finally.
Might have been.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's ethical to watch a man with binoculars and a long focus lens. Do you suppose it's ethical even if you prove that he didn't commit a crime?
To which Lisa says,
I'm not much on Rear Window ethics.
Again, using the title of the movie in the movie. And he kind of goes, well, of course, they could be watching me. To which Lisa replies, I think this is really interesting. She says,
Jeff, if someone came in here, they wouldn't believe what they'd see.
What?
You and me with long faces, plunged into despair because we find out a man didn't kill his wife. We're two of the most frightening ghouls I've ever known.
And then she says, whatever happened to the old saying, love thy neighbor? You know what this made me think of?
What's that?
Jimmy Stewart in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Okay. Because when he's making his big speech at the end, he says,
because of just one plain simple rule. Love thy neighbor.
Now, I don't know that Hitchcock was thinking about Mr. Smith.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
It probably not.
No, I'm sure not.
But
still.
but if you think of, what are two of Jimmy Stewart's most famous roles are Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and It's a Wonderful Life. And the theme of both those movies in a lot of ways is love thy neighbor.
Yeah.
And here we have Jimmy Stewart, 9 years after It's a Wonderful Life in a movie whose basic theme is don't trust your neighbor, spy on your neighbor.
Spy thy neighbor, yeah.
Spy thy neighbor. By the way, that's a good movie title.
Spy thy neighbor?
Produced by the Cine-Files.
Done.
And then he said, oh my God, his next line. She just said, whatever happened to love thy neighbor? He says,
I think I'll start reviving that tomorrow. I'll begin with Miss Torso.
That's weird.
He literally said he's with the woman that who's come over to have sex with him.
Yeah.
And he's literally said, good idea on this love thy neighbor thing. I'm going to start with her. Oh my God. But she closes the curtains and says, not if I have to move across the way and start doing the dance of the seven veils. It's like, no, I'll move it. I'll be your Miss Torso. You don't need another Miss Torso. Right. And finally, she closes the curtains, shades, and says, show's over for tonight. And she picks up her suitcase with a nightgown and says, preview of coming attractions. Like, you can't be more forward than what she's doing in this scene.
Yeah.
And she goes in the bedroom and we fade out. Later on, she enters. She's in the nightgown. By the way, this nightgown is almost the same one as the wife was wearing that got in the bed. Yeah. And right before anything can happen in this scene, we hear screaming. And they go to the window, and there the woman on the balcony is crying because her dog is dead.
Yep.
And an interesting thing happens in the scene as everybody, the people in the party, every single person, Miss Torso, Miss Lonely Hearts, everyone comes out to look, is it is the only time in the film where our perspective is not from Jeff's apartment.
Right.
Where the camera moves down on the ground, we get close-ups of Miss Torso and Miss Lonely Hearts, and man, the woman whose dog is dead is just screaming and weeping at everybody. And man, they put the dog into the basket and lift it up, and it's sort of like a funeral procession. I mean, it's really sad. Then the party goes back to the party. Miss Torso goes back inside. And Jeff goes, you know what? For a minute, that Tom Doyle almost had me convinced.
In the whole courtyard, only one person didn't come to the window. Look.
And we see that cigar.
Yeah.
Yep.
He knew.
Yep. And why did he kill the dog?
Because the dog smelled where he buried the body.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, later on, Stella is back. And we look through, and Torvald is washing the walls of the bathroom, thus proving her theory, I think, about the
the hot tub.
about the tub, yeah. And she just says,
Must have splattered a lot.
Oh God!
And they just look at her, and she goes, "What? It's what we're all. Isn't that what we're all thinking?" I love her. She's great. And suddenly Jeff has a thought, and he asks for some slides and a little viewer, and he pulls out the slides, and they're going, what's he doing? And he goes, he just thinks he just solved a murder. And they go, oh, Mrs. Torvald? And he goes, no, it's the dog. And it's a slide of the courtyard and of the flowers in the courtyard. And we look at it and then look at reality. Look at the slide, look at reality. Hands it to Lisa. She looks at the slide, looks at the reality. This is like those games in the newspaper where you have two pictures side by side. You have to find the change.
Yeah, the differences.
I suck at those.
Really?
I'm terrible.
Oh, wow.
Oh, awful.
I love that.
Awful. And I couldn't see the difference in this. I mean, even knowing, I'm like, which flowers are shorter? But apparently 2 of the yellow zinnias in the front are now shorter today than they were before. And flowers don't usually shrink.
Yeah.
And again, what is that doing? It's forcing the audience to pay attention to the image.
Yeah.
It's involving us, making us the detectives like they are. And that is where the dog is sniffing around, and something must be buried there. And like, yeah, Mrs. Torvald.
Yeah.
To which Stella says, like, no, you couldn't bury a whole body there. Like, you don't, I know about bodies. That's not big enough, but you could have buried a part of the body there.
Yeah.
So we're going to call Doyle, and Lisa's like, let's dig him up. Let's go dig him up. And he's like, no, are you crazy?
Yeah.
You're going to get your neck broken. And she's like, well, we got to find a way to get into the apartment. I'm not sure what getting into the apartment helps you with. Oh, no, I guess it's the ring.
Yeah.
That's the thing we're going to figure out. And finally he has, I got an idea. Get me some note paper. And we go into this great top-down shot, which is very different from anything we've seen. And we see Jimmy Stewart with the note paper and Stella and Lisa standing around, and the camera pushes in until we see the note directed to Lars Torvald.
Yeah.
And the note says, what have you done with her? And he folds it up, puts it in the envelope, and we fade out. Watching through this long lens, we see 3 windows. We see the hallway, and there's Lisa in the hallway. And we see an empty space, which is sort of the living room. And we see Torvald lighting the cigar. And Lisa slides the envelope under the door. Torvald gets up, opens the door just as she goes around the corner.
Yeah, it's really close.
Really close. So here's the thing people don't quite get about movies is that timing like that takes practice.
Oh, yeah.
You have to do it over and over again, and you want to get it exactly right. You don't want him to open up the door a second after she went around the corner.
Right.
You want him to open the door exactly the right moment.
Yeah.
And this whole scene, because what's going to happen next is then he's going to look out the window while she's down below, and he's going to go lean over the fire escape, and she's got to duck inside again, just at the right moment.
Yeah.
It is really scary. And Jeff, who's watching the whole thing, it's really scary for him. I mean, Stella watching the whole thing is really scary for her because this was not a great plan.
No. No.
But we do see him pick up the envelope and open it up, and we see his reaction shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a great, great reaction. Stella goes for a drink because this whole thing was so darn stressful. And then she goes, mind if I borrow that portable keyhole? Which is for the peeping Tom. It's a funny expression. And she looks over at Miss Lonely Heart. And Miss Lonely Heart is pouring out some red pills.
Yeah.
And Stella, being a nurse, she recognizes those red pills and basically Miss Lonelyheart's thinking of killing herself.
Yeah.
Lisa comes in to find out what the reaction was that Thorvald has, and we cut to a close-up of Jimmy Stewart looking up at Lisa with the look of pure love.
Yeah.
So the woman who brought him the lobster, no, didn't work. The beautiful dresses didn't work. The woman with the nightgown didn't work. The woman who was willing to risk her life to go catch this murderer, he is in love with her.
Yeah, that worked.
That worked. And now we're watching Raymond Burr with his handbag and packing. And there's a great moment, by the way, where we're following him in the long lens and the camera loses him for a second and then finds him again, which just adds some reality to this film, because you don't want all perfect camera stops. And now this Jeff suddenly thinks of, oh, maybe one of those rings was the wedding ring, and she wouldn't have left anywhere without that wedding ring. Lisa asks Stella, do you ever leave your wedding ring at home? And Stella says,
The only way anybody could get that ring would be to chop off my finger.
and as she says, finger, you see her realize what she just said.
Right.
And at that point, Lisa goes, let's go find out what's buried down in the garden.
Jesus.
And she's all excited. I think she saw the look of love from Jeff. And she's like, you know what? I've always wanted to meet Mrs. Thorwald. And Jeff's like going, whoa, hold on. What's this about? And Stella's totally on board. And the thing that I thought at this moment is, wait, what about Miss Lonelyheart?
Right.
Like, you introduced this woman's thinking about killing herself.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not kind of focused on that at the moment. We're talking about, let's go dig this thing up. And I love, by the way, Lisa, when Jeff is resisting, goes, look, Jeff, if you're squeamish, it's like
calling him out on it.
Yep.
Yep.
And he comes up with an idea. I bet I can give you 15 minutes, which is he gets Thorvald's phone number.
Oh, yeah.
He dials. We hear the ring, and we're watching as Thorvald picks up the phone.
Yeah.
This is like worlds coming together now, you know, and we actually hear his voice.
Hello? Did you get my note?
He goes, who are you?
I'll give you a chance to find out. Meet me in the bar at the Albert Hotel. Do it right away. Why should I? Little business meeting to settle the estate of your late wife.
So he's calling as a blackmailer.
I have only $100 or so.
That's a start.
I don't feel bad for Thorvald. I don't want to say that.
Right.
But there are moments of vulnerability. He's not just a big scary villain. You know what I mean? He's like he's a guy who did this horrible thing who's, again, I'm not sympathetic for him, but you know what I mean? Like, he's not, you know, as we've talked about the great villains in film.
Yeah.
He ain't one of them.
No.
He's just a dude who killed his wife. But he grabs his hat and he heads out, and they say, okay, we're going to go. And he says, well, I'll signal you with a flashbulb if he's coming close. So they leave. We see him grab his long lens, and then he goes and pulls out his flash and his flash bulbs, and he goes back to the window. And now we see it's actually almost exactly the same shot as the opening shot of the film when we followed the cat up. And so they go up these steps, they climb over this wall, they go into the other courtyard, they get out the shovel, they start digging. And Jeff dials Doyle again on the phone, ends up getting a babysitter, and leaves a message that, no, this is important and call me. And the composer now has a jazz group up in his apartment. They're playing, and they start playing Lisa, the same song we've been playing, but now played complete, like it's really complete. And Miss Lonelyhearts has sat down to write something, to which Jeff's response is,
Stella was wrong about Miss Lonelyhearts.
no, dude, she's writing a suicide note.
Right.
Stella was not wrong. And the long lens now pans down to the empty hole. There's nothing there. And Stella looks up and shakes her head. Kind of like she shook her head when the trunk went by.
Yeah.
You know? And Lisa has another idea. Says something to Stella. Stella's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
But Lisa climbs up the fire escape.
Yeah.
And Jeff is going, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? She climbs up the fire escape, onto the fire escape, tries to go in through one window, can't, sees that the window that's not connected to the fire escape is maybe 3 feet away, is open, climbs over to the outside of the fire escape.
Insane.
Reaches, puts her leg across and goes in through the other window.
Right.
This has gotten scary.
Yeah.
And Jeff is going a bit nuts. And again, great performance from Jimmy Stewart. He grabs his lens.
Those eyes of his are so great. Those desperate eyes of his.
His performance of reaction throughout this film is amazing. We see her find the purse, and she looks in it. There's nothing. She turns it upside down. It's clearly empty. Again, great storytelling. And he's going, come on, get out of there. Get out of there. And Stella comes in, and she says that Lisa had said, well, ring Thorwald's phone if I'm in trouble. And he goes like, I'm going to call that right now. But then they realize that Miss Lonely Heart is really about to kill herself.
Yeah.
So now he's, instead of calling Thorwald's, he calls the police. And we hear the music, and Miss Lonely Heart stops.
Mr. Jeffries, the music stopped her.
And the music is so powerful, in fact, that we realize that directly above Miss Lonely Heart, Lisa has stopped to also listen to the music. And we were so distracted by calling the police that we didn't notice, and Jeff didn't notice, and Stella didn't notice that Thorwald was coming back.
Yep.
Lisa!
And the reaction from Jeff is just huge.
Pure desperation.
Yeah. He goes into the house. The police answer.
Precinct 6, Sergeant Allgood.
Hello. Look, a man is assaulting a woman at 125 West 9th Street, second floor, at the rear.
Thorwald finds the purse. He looks around, and then he finds Lisa.
Yeah.
And he backs her up, and you can see her trying to talk, and we don't know what she's saying.
Yeah.
He grabs her and throws her down, and we're like, oh shit, is Lisa going to die? And he's holding out his hand for something, and she gives him something. And fortunately, as we think like, oh my God, something terrible is happening, she starts screaming, Jeff.
Oh, no.
We see the police show up outside the apartment.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen at this moment.
Right.
The police bang on the door because Thorwald's turned the light off.
Yeah.
Like he's going to kill her.
Yeah.
And then he turns the light back on. He goes out to the police. The police come in, and the look of sort of pitiful guilt on Thorwald's face is huge. And we don't, again, know what Lisa's saying, but it ends up so that she's kind of saying, I broke into his apartment. She doesn't say this guy's a murderer.
No.
And as she's talking to the police, her back is to us, and her hands are behind her back, and she is wearing the wedding ring on her finger, and she points to it so that Jeff will see that she has the wedding ring.
Yeah.
And she is getting taken away by the police with the wedding ring.
Right.
By the way, hero.
Yeah.
This is full hero. I mean, Jeff is just sitting in his apartment with a broken leg.
action,
Yeah. And unfortunately, though, as Jeff is seeing the wedding ring, Thorwald looks behind the back and sees the wedding ring.
Yeah.
And then in one of the most amazing moments in the film, slowly turns and looks straight into the camera.
That's the greatest moment in this movie, and one of the greatest reveals in any film I've ever seen. Because Burr's face, when he realizes finally who it is that has been hounding him over the last, with that letter and everything like that, but then his realization that this guy could have been watching him the whole time is all in that face, man.
Well, and something that you don't really think about is most of the time, unless you're in a reality show or a news show or something like that, actors don't look right into the barrel of the camera.
Exactly.
Like even when we've talked about like Stanley Kubrick films where you have actors that are almost like in The Shining, they're right in the center of the frame. They are looking probably at just the corner, the rim of the lens.
Right.
When you look directly in the lens, it feels completely different. And so Raymond Burr he's looking right at us.
Yeah.
We have been the voyeurs the whole movie, and he is seeing us.
Yeah.
He's not just seeing Jeff.
Yeah.
So the police take Lisa away. Obviously, she's being arrested.
Yep.
And Jeff's first thought is, we got to bail out Lisa.
Yeah.
And so he's looking, we got to get some money together. It's probably $250. I don't know why he knows how much bail for a first-time offense is.
Yeah.
And he's not thinking, the murderer just saw me.
Right.
We're thinking the murderer just saw me, but they get together some money. They go into Lisa's purse. They go into Stella's purse, and Stella goes off to the jail.
Right, to bail her out.
And the phone rings, and it's Doyle. And he's kind of irritated with Jeff, unsurprisingly, but quickly Jeff explains that Lisa's been arrested and they found the wedding ring and that she's in jail. And Doyle goes, okay, I will go down and straighten this thing out. So to some degree, Doyle is convinced at least that he needs to go do something right now.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that Jeff says to him is, this fellow knows he's being watched. He's not going to wait around forever. Right. Again, not thinking that I'm now in danger. He hangs up the phone. The phone immediately rings. He picks it up. And he says, while looking out the window at the dark apartment,
Tom, I think Thorwald's left. I don't see.
And then he figures it out. And there's a pause and a reaction. And a pause continues. And then he says,
hello.
And there's a long pause and then a click. And then you see him realize what's about to happen.
Yep.
Great Great Hitchcock moments.
Yep.
And we hear a heavy door slam. And we hear footsteps.
Yeah, man.
And we're in this high angle of him in the wheelchair trying to figure out what to do. And now he's looking around going, what do I do?
Right.
You know, he's looking, is there a weapon? Is there, you know, and he goes over to the front door, which there's a step up. He can't even get to the door to lock the door. I think.
Right.
And finally, the only weapon he finds is he has his flash and his flash bulbs, which he had to signal them before. And the steps get closer and closer, and it's slow. Again, this is this thing we talked about, the difference between suspense and surprise.
Yeah.
This is suspense.
Yep.
It goes on a while. Jeff wheels all the way back in the room, right towards the window. He's got his flash bulbs ready. The door opens a crack, and in walks this huge silhouette of Raymond Burr, looking really powerful, and he moves into the light.
Yeah.
It's really scary.
Now we're the voyeur watching Jeff.
Yeah. Good point.
And right, in this moment, now we are on the outside watching Jeff.
Yep.
As if we're across the way watching what he's going through.
Well, and to be clear, what is all of film but voyeurism?
Yeah, true.
You
Very
know?
true.
You know, and Hitchcock is a person that, like, it's not like he lived crazy lives.
No,
He had a prurient desire to look into the darkest, you know, naughtiest. You know, we go back to this is what happens to boys who are naughty when they get put in the jail cell.
Yeah.
This is what he wants to look at, and this is the moment. And Torvald's first like, well, what do you want from me? Like, why are you doing this? And he won't answer.
Nope.
Your friend, the girl, could have turned me in. Why didn't she?
No answer.
What is it you want? A lot of money? I don't have any money.
No answer.
Say something. Tell me what you want.
No answer.
Can you get me that ring back?
No,
Tell her to bring it back.
I can't. The police have it by now.
And this is it. Like, now I've got to kill you.
Yeah.
And he steps forward and he hits him with that flash.
Yeah.
And you see Raymond Burr's reaction, and then you see everything go red and fade out of the red.
Yeah.
And then it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again.
Yeah.
What do you think of these flashes as a defense?
Oh, interesting. I thought it was ingenious by him as a photographer to be able to use this.
Definitely think that. Yeah.
But the question is, do you become more accustomed to it as the more you get flashed? I don't know.
I think the first one is great. I think the second is great. I think the third and the fourth are not.
Okay, it's too much.
It's too much because
Okay.
I'd cover my eyes.
Yeah,
you know what
right.
I mean? Like,
you figure it out.
yeah, it's like if it was the first one is shocking and
Yeah,
brilliant,
right.
and having the photographer use the flash as photography as his defense, great.
Genius, yeah.
But it does to me. It goes on like one too many.
Gotcha.
But he steps forward, and finally, he grabs him, and they start wrestling. And we see that the police are across the way, and he yells for them. And we see Lisa's there, and Doyle's there.
Yeah.
And Burr attacks, and he's on him. And the attack is really weird.
It's like a clumsy bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, two things it reminds me of. One is Orson Welles in Touch of Evil.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of violent, disorienting thing. And the other thing is because it's cut really fast in a really disjointed way.
Yeah.
It's something we're going to see in a way more extreme view in the murder scene in Psycho in the shower. Is that we don't quite know what angle we're looking at. The cuts are really fast. There's this weird moment where his legs are up and we don't quite know what's happening. We end up out towards the window and everyone starts hearing this, and we see Miss Lonely Hearts and we see the newlyweds and we see Jeff is now hanging from the window, and Doyle asks for a gun.
Creel, give me a 38.
And the cops grab Torvald, and Jeff is still hanging there, and then he falls. And Stella runs up, asks for a medical bag, and Lisa runs up, and he's just happy she's alive.
Oh, Lisa, sweetie, if anything had happened to you.
Shut up, I'm all right.
Gee, I'm proud of you.
And now he asks, the next question he asks Doyle,
You got enough for a search warrant now?
Doyle says, oh yeah. And then a cop leans out the window and says, Thorwald's ready to take us on a tour of the East River. And Stella whispers something to Doyle, who asks,
You saying it was buried in the flower bed?
Yeah. He said the dog got too inquisitive, so he dug it up. It's in a hat box over in his apartment.
here's the thing. How did he have time to tell him all these things in the apartment?
In those black frames, maybe?
Yeah. But it's okay.
Right.
Because one of the things that Hitchcock knows that's really important is once you get to the end of your movie, get to the end as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And that we certainly do because we fade out we fade in, and it's sometime later. It's now 70 degrees rather than 100 degrees.
Yeah.
We kind of check in with some of our other people. Like the composer is putting on a record, and he says, I hope it's going to be a hit. This is its first release. And who is in his room? But
Miss Lonely Hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she says, I'd love to hear it. You know, one thing I didn't notice, and I wish I had looked, is she wearing her glasses?
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember.
Because I bet that she is.
Maybe she is.
Because that means that he would be willing to see her as she really is.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if it's on the YouTube.
But he saved her life, and he was lonely too.
Right.
You know, we didn't think a lot about him being lonely, but
no, because there was always people in the apartment.
Right, but even in one of the parties, he's kind of drunk and unhappy when everyone's partying at one point.
True.
And she says, I can't tell you what this music has meant to me because it saves her. And then we start hearing the song, and the camera pulls past our murder apartment, which is now being painted. The wife on the balcony is training a new dog.
Yes.
We see Miss Torso, who opens up her door, and in walks Stanley, her actual husband.
Yes.
Who was a short, somewhat nebbish-looking guy who was in the military. And she says, wow, what's the Army done for you? Which I think means he's lost weight.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, the Army's made me hungry. What you got in the icebox? Good to be home.
Mm-hmm.
So again, by the way, he isn't romantic with her.
No.
He goes right to the men are terrible in this movie for the most part. We see the sculptor, we see the honeymooners, and they're not doing well.
No.
Because the wife says, if you had told me you quit your job, we wouldn't have gotten married.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, this isn't going to go very well.
Right.
The camera pans up to Jeff, just like we were at the opening of the movie. He's asleep, except now, instead of one cast, he has two casts. Poor guy. And the camera continues to pan to Lisa, who's reading a book that says The High Himalayas. And she's wearing slacks now, which we haven't seen before. So she's not dressed in a fabulous dress.
Right.
And we go, oh, maybe she is going to go on the adventures with him. But she lowers the book, sees that he's asleep, and picks up Bizarre and starts reading that. And one more important detail. Do you know what she is not wearing?
The ring?
A wedding ring.
Yeah.
They are not married.
No.
So I don't know that we really know where this relationship is going to go. And this is the end of the film.
Yeah.
We reach our credits.
She's not wearing her glasses.
She's not wearing her glasses.
As you were talking, I watched the ending
Yeah, I
scene
saw
on
it.
YouTube. She is not wearing glasses, but they look very happy.
They look happy. Yeah. So we've reached the end of Rear Window. Of course, this was a really big hit. It was nominated for 4 Oscars. It was Best Picture, Screenplay, Cinematography, and Sound. It won nothing. This is the year of On the Waterfront.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Grace Kelly did win Best Actress for The Country Girl, which I've never seen.
Wow.
Yeah. But not for this.
Oh, interesting.
I have no idea, but she might be amazing in it. And this is like, as we were saying when we talked about Hitchcock, this is this era. He made both Dial M for Murder and Rear Window this year. Started Alfred Hitchcock Presents in 55. In 56 is, I think, The Man Who Knew Too Much. 57 is we get into North by Northwest, and then Vertigo, and then Psycho, and then The Birds. I mean, this run of Hitchcock is amazing.
Yeah, agreed.
John, what are your final thoughts?
Man, what a great film to revisit or to start our hit month of Hitchcock and explore the work in this film and how it like sparks this run, as you were saying here at the end, Steve. It's a fantastic film that, like as I said at the beginning, still holds up in 2018. Has even more resonance, I think, as we've become more involved in other people's lives, and gossip magazines now, all of the gossip websites, all this stuff is available. And especially what I do, you know, you hear all the gossip, you read all the gossip about all the people in business and whatever, and you hear all the behind the scenes stuff that you can't really report on because there's no sourcing of it, but you get it from sources who are friends of yours. And there's people are intimately involved with everyone's lives now, and this film kind of is prescient in that way of what can happen, right? Because look at all these podcasts that have come out, reopening cold cases about past crimes, and we're in essence, Jimmy Stewart, listening to these reporters tell us the journey that they went on as they explored these crimes. So it's a very prescient film in that way, and I appreciate that for what it is. But also, it's again Jimmy Stewart showing you what a masterful actor he is, that he never gets the credit for. Oh, Pacino, De Niro, Brando, right? Everyone talks about those people, but no one talks about people like Jimmy Stewart, who's able to deftly transition throughout his career from certain roles to certain roles to certain roles and become a deeper and more complex as an actor and show you the shades of the ugliness inside of people at times without you hating the guy behind it, or in front of it rather. So I love that. But in the end, it's a fantastic film that I think is eminently rewatchable, and you'll get something different out of it every time, depending on where you are, and leaves you wanting to see more from Hitchcock, which we get in the next few years.
And in our next week, as we continue our month of Hitchcock. I'm so glad that I got to revisit the film and really study it for this episode. I learned so much just in terms of craftsmanship. You can't get better. The storytelling is absolutely perfection. You literally, and this is this thing that Hitchcock calls pure cinema, which is you literally are reading Jimmy Stewart's thoughts based on just a shot and his reaction, a shot and his reaction. It's just masterful storytelling. But more than that, I think this movie is just so much deeper than a lot of the other Hitchcock films because of this idea of using cinema and these images that he sees to actually explore what's going on in his own head. And it relates, I think, to what Stella says at the beginning, which is rather than looking out the window, we should be looking in at us. And that is what this film is doing, is through him looking out the window, we are seeing the decision process within his own head. We are seeing his views on relationships and marriage played out, like his desire for sex with Miss Torso. We're seeing this image of Lisa as Miss Lonely Hearts and Miss Torso. We're seeing the honeymooners. We're seeing the unhappy marriage. And of course, we're not looking up at that happy family. And so we're seeing all of the things that he's thinking through. It's almost like we're moving into his brain. And I think in a way, it's Hitchcock exploring personally things that he is thinking about, his obsession with blondes, his being a voyeur, a person who sees the world by looking through the camera, his intellectualism, his controllingness, his need to have things his way. Obviously, all of his films, we see his need to have things his way. And this makes this movie somehow more personal than some of the other Hitchcock movies, which are equally beautifully crafted, but they don't get to the depth that I think this gets to for me. And I think, just as you said, is that, again, we have to look at, we all have that desire to know what's going on, be up in other people's business. I certainly have it. And that desire comes from all sorts of social reasons that come through evolution, but taken too far, it ain't healthy. We actually should be allowed to go be ourselves privately and do stuff that we don't actually want people to see. It's not that those things are necessarily murdering your wife and horrible. It's just that you should have the right to your own privacy. So that's what we think about Rear Window. Of course, we want to hear what you think. Please visit us on Facebook at the Cine-Files. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, on YouTube, on Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play. There are all sorts of places to listen to our show, including on our website, cinephiles.net, where you can also buy every single movie we've ever reviewed. And we're going to put together a whole page that's going to be devoted to Alfred Hitchcock, including Hitchcock Truffaut and a bunch of his other great films. So when you want to build up your Hitchcock collection, this is the place to do it. If you want to support the show, like so many of our Patreons have, you can visit patreon.com/thecine-files. And as we've just announced, we are beginning a new thing for Patreon subscribers only, which is Cine-Files Shorts, where John and I are going to do 10 to 15-minute conversations on movies that don't have to be 10 years or older, and they don't even have to be good. If you pledge $5 or more, you can make a Cine-Files short suggestion, and we might do your short and do a short conversation on it. As always, you can reach me on Twitter at SRMorris, and starting now, you can also reach me on Instagram at SRMorris1. You got to put the 1 on because I couldn't get the same SR Morris, but I'm trying. It's going to take me a little while to get in the rhythm of doing it, but I know that I haven't been a good person in communicating on all the social media, so please reach out to me at SRMorris1 on Instagram. John, where can they reach you?
Well, you can always find me at The Roca Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And although Steve says it don't have to be good, we'd prefer it if these shorts were good so we could have something interesting to talk about.
Well, to be clear, we're not going to talk about it if we don't find it interesting.
That's true. That's a fair point. So you can suggest Police Academy 6, but we might not talk about it.
I've never seen it, so yeah, we're not going to talk about it.
Exactly. But I love this idea that we're doing the Cine-Files shorts. It was a great thing that we're getting a lot more. We're getting cleaned up, and that's our goal for 2019, to be more cleaned up on the Patreon side of things, so that those of you who've been so great to donate and give and support the show, we want to make sure you get what you or have been paying for or investing investing in and making sure we're meeting your needs as a podcast. So thank you so much for being patient with us. And definitely 2019, and we're getting some help from Clay Williams to make it all happen. And we can't thank him enough.
And I think that's it for this week. We will be back next week for another installment in our month of Hitchcock with the film Vertigo.